world where darkness and deceit ruled, and authoritarians imposed their will. One group of heroes dares to resist and be a beacon of hope and truth. They are the Rogue Resistance.
That's right. That is exactly what we do. We fight them until we can't. So I want to say hello to everybody. Laura's running a bit behind. I know that she will be here momentarily. Of course, I want to introduce my esteemed co-host for the evening, and that be Mr. Wes Moody of the Wes Moody webcast.
Hey, my friends.
And also the man that is spinning the dials, pushing the buttons. You know him as Zach, aka Brightest Day.
Good evening, everybody. I am a little under the weather, so I will be off camera and backstage when our special guest appears. Please share out the stream if you have not, and enjoy yourselves.
So yeah, we were talking backstage, and I wanted to. And I'll share this too with Lara when she gets here. But we had a nice phone conversation about 20 or so minutes ago, and she was asking, well, how did you get started in journalism? And I was telling her about how I was down on Constitution Avenue there on January 6th. And, she thought that story was very awesome. So, I was explaining to her just the human element that I saw down there. And, I think that, I think that's important, because one thing that I know that Lara's all about is that human element, putting a human face on stories. And I really appreciate that about the way that she does journalism. And that is one of the things that heavily inspires me. And, that's one of the reasons I'm very, very, honored and grateful for this interview. Like I said, I know that she'll be here momentarily. I'm assuming that she's, doing what ladies do and get ready and all that. So, when she's here, we will bring her right on. But yeah, Wes, interesting things that are happening, sir.
Where to start? Geez. Yeah, 2022 should be a pretty interesting year, I think. And, you have the forces of evil and the forces of darkness both kind of coalescing and marshaling, and should be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I wanted to, before we begin, I wanted to kind of get your take on the recent Nuremberg 2.0 thing And do you think ultimately that will make a difference?
You talking about the Michael Yeadon thing?
Where they implicated Klaus Schwab and everyone else officially.
Well, certainly the person bringing the suit has a lot of credibility, having been a former Pfizer vice president. And, he's come out and talked about, he and both Robert Malone have come out and basically said, yeah, this is not what it was sold as. And yeah, they're going for crimes against humanity. I believe Bill Gates is named in that suit, the heads of the large pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
The problem, see, I think it's a good thing because it lays out the case, and that's going to be needed. What concerns me is that this is the International Court of Justice, I believe, and so I don't know a lot about it, but I would have to assume that the machinery is at least controlled by the globalists. So, I mean, if anything, it lays the case out so that when we have a real Nuremberg 2.0, we can do something about it. But yeah, I think it's great. I think it's needed. I think that when somebody comes out with that kind of moxie, that kind of testicular fortitude, it encourages others to step up. And I mean, you'll notice that after that happened, even with Dr. Malone's Twitter ban, that that's Robert Malone seems to have gone a little bit further out in speaking out, a little bit more bold on what he thinks the entire picture is.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I am concerned over the rampant wave of tech censorship. I believe that a lot of there is a huge crackdown in progress. And I see it with just the suspending the doctors, the different doctors' accounts. I know that McCullough's gotten a hard time. Malone, obviously. And it's alarming. That is seriously alarming because you're talking full-on suppression of truth at this point. And that's no bueno when we've gotten to blatantly that level.
Well, I mean, it's extremely alarming, and those are prominent people. What about the people that aren't so prominent that want to say prescribe ivermectin, or they recommend against someone getting the jab? I mean, those doctors, they're going after their licenses, ones that aren't as publicly prominent. And then, I have some friends and some clients that are nurses that told me that a large nonprofit, I don't want to say which one, but it's a large, you would recognize the name, has actually forbidden the prescribing of ivermectin. And this client of mine,
Yes.
this friend, she was injured by the Moderna shot. She has Bell's palsy. She couldn't work for months because of that. And this is a nurse, and she's like, ivermectin was the only thing that was working for me. And now, through my own work, I can't even get prescribed ivermectin. She has to go down to Mexico to get ivermectin. How ridiculous is that?
Yeah, that is absolutely 100% ridiculous, man. And it gets more out of hand each passing day, and that's what concerns me. I do want to acknowledge the chat because, boy, we have a lot of people. 45 people watching at the moment. Free Speech Gaming's here. Bones here. Flipped Out. Our boy Flipped Out. Me and Jason's co-host every Sunday on Jason's show. Awesome to see Flip here. Shout out to the Phantom Collective for sure. And Flip says, rest assured, those at the top are making money here somehow, if not money, power. Correct. The lovely Sherry, great to see you. TZ Canadian, great to see you, sir.
Hey, my friend.
Janet, it's always wonderful to see you. Thank you for making it in here. I know a number of my friends from Twitter Spaces are also here. Our fellow rogues from Rogue Entertainment are here. Tommy, of course, Vinny Art. Phil TMNT's here. Hey, Phil. Great to see you, my friend. Small Time Republic makes a great point. When you try to silence someone, all you do is galvanize their belief more. That is indeed correct. Wow, we have, of course, author Stephen Walton is in the chat. Shane Nolan, great to see you, sir. Chris Fisk, great to see you, Chris. Always love to see you, my friend. Wonderful supporter of the channel. And of course, I have more mods than God right now in the chat. Janet being one. Terry Rose is here. Of course, I believe that I have up to about like 10 wrenches in this chat at the moment. Shellback's here. Hey, Tim, great to see you. Of course, Brightest Day highlighting the exclamation point tip command. If you would like to use stream elements to, show your enthusiasm about the stream or to the channel, you can do so with that particular command. Exclamation point tip. God, Brightest Day is going to clip me saying exclamation.
Shout out to our good friend Chase Geyser in the chat of One American Podcast.
That is right, man. Chase is here. It's great to see. Chase. A shout out to Chase. He kind of helped put this together. So let me catch this. It's actually Laura. Right back.
Every rose has its thorn, just like every cowboy sings a sad, sad song. Oh, I don't know.
No, stop. You'll get us copyright claimed.
I don't think I'm in tune enough for that. All right. So how we doing, chat? Hail Adega. Hail Shane Nolan. Hail Vinny Arts. Hail Janet from Another Planet. Freeze Peach Gaming liked my singing. Hail Terry Rose. So let's see. That's pretty much all. That's pretty much all the poison I know. Oh wait, what's that one? God damn it! No, that's Motley Crue. It's the same old situation. It's the same old song and dance.
Yeah, for YouTube, that's a lot.
As good as I can do. Sorry.
So for those in the chat who may have questions for our guest, please feel free to post them in the chat. I will copy and paste them into the private chat, and Drew and Wes will decide if they get forwarded to our guest. Please keep that in mind.
That was much more professional than what I just did.
Hey, I'll let you have your moment.
I know, I had to.
Get all the
Hey,
jokes
his
out now,
phone
right?
rang. Yeah, his phone rang first. It was his fault.
Hey, I wasn't going to say anything about that.
I know.
It's not the first time it's happened.
Yeah, that's why I always have mine on the vibrate mode or whatever.
Tell me what lessons we can learn from BSG about what's going on in the world right now. Never trust your toaster. Actually, so there is a specific episode that deals with a doctor who is assigned to treat a preventable illness among a certain population on the fleet.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. That was Laura. She said that she had a couple of family things to take care of. Apologies for the delay. She is incoming momentarily for sure, and we will be good to go. So as soon as she figures out StreamYard, she will be right here. So we are all set. So
what was this? What was the song on your ringtone?
Oh, that.
Yeah.
By the way, that is Skid Row, and it's called "In a Darkened Room." It's actually a really good song. It's from their album "Slave to the Grind." Actually, by the way, those of you that go back to my age that enjoy the band Skid Row, that is probably their finest album. Just throwing that out there. Very good rock album.
So, Drew, I made mention to the chat while you were away that if they have questions for our guest, they can feel free to put them in the chat, and I will copy paste them into the private chat, and you and Wes can decide whether or not they get forwarded on to our guest.
Nice.
Yeah. So at brightest day.
Yeah. 66 Starship Alien says a slab of booze is owed to everyone for the phone disruption. That's the rule. Oh man. Yeah. I think
I got a request. I think I got a request to do 18 in Life from Skid Row. 18 in life, get counted. 18 in life to go. No crime this time.
Yeah. Steven knows all about that album. He says that album is great. And our guest of honor is here. Welcome to Miss
Drew,
Lara
you sent
Logan.
it to me in Signal. You sent me the link in Signal. That's why I couldn't find it.
Oh, is that what it was? Because see, I just use Signal as my default texting app on my phone. And
why, by the way? Why do you do that?
It's just what I've always done. When my friend sent me Signal and I installed it on my phone, I just used it as my default text app because it's like it's good. I actually really like it.
I always think these platforms that are created to be secure, like Signal was set up by a front company for the CIA. So, all you're doing is channeling everything that they want to spy on into a convenient location for them, right? So they're not
okay. Well, that's good to know.
I like it. That's my thinking.
All right. Well,
I'm conspiracy minded too, like that.
That's not a conspiracy. It's a fact.
Yeah,
I know.
Introductions are in order. So, of course, Laura, it's nice to meet you. I'm Drew. This, of course, is my colleague and very esteemed friend, Wes Moody of the Wes Moody webcast. And, of course, the gentleman next to you is my producer, Zach, a.k.a. Brightest Day. He will be heading to the back to kind of work the logistics. So, all right, Zach, say goodbye, everyone.
Kicking you out, Zach? That's rude.
Pleasure to meet you, and away I go.
Okay. I'm going to close the door so none of my 5 crazy, insane dogs and cats can come in and bother us. Oh, wait, 1 dog's already in here, so that makes it 4.
Okay. Right. Oh, man, this is cool because I'll tell you what, folks. This lady is one of us. She is so, just everyday life, and I love it. I'm here for all of it because, we've all had that when we've been live streaming. I've had my needy cat Gambit that'll want to jump on my lap,
yes,
be a part of things. So yeah, that's it's so awesome to have you here. I mean, I am so grateful for you to spend time talking to us today. And, I was delighted when I got to speak to you on the phone and kind of talk to you a little bit about where I started in journalism. And I think wanted to lead off with that topic about January 6th, because being there and seeing, the human face of it. And like we were talking about the people, like, for example, like I talked to a man that drove up from Missouri, like a family of 4. And his biggest issue is like, I just want some accountability. I want to know what's really going on. I wish someone from the government would just answer our questions or come speak to us, and hearing people say things like that, Lara, it really hit me. It was so, when you see the human face of these type of events, and then you see the blatant misrepresentation that the mainstream puts on it, it really made me angry.
It should. It should make all of us angry. Unfortunately, we get so caught up in our own politics, and we can't see the forest for the trees, because that it becomes all about that, and that plays right into their hands, right? Because I mean, even people like, for example, Antifa, right? They have no idea that they're not really heading into the world they think they're heading into, that they're being used just like Patriot Prayer and Proud Boys and anyone else is being used for a specific purpose. They're going to be the last ones to find out. So imagine how pissed they're going to be, right? When it becomes clear that they've been nothing but patsies for these their puppet masters as well. And when I hear you talk about January 6th, I'm reminded of two things that I think are probably among the most significant takeaways from that. And one is that it's really staggering to me when you think about how they tried to make January 6th as if it was, like a massacre, right? And a genocide all in one day, and the most terrible thing that had ever happened in the history of the world. And we had everything from, dead Capitol policemen to dramatic testimonies and weeping guys in uniform. I got to tell you, you don't have to know a lot of sheriffs or policemen or, border agents or soldiers to know that nobody in uniform says the kind of stuff that those guys were saying. Nobody talks about, I was being crushed and thought I was going to die, but it was all worth it just to crush one fascist, and I would do it all again. Okay, no, that is not real. That is not real. And I don't know, I can't tell you this person is a paid actor, or this person is a political operative, or this person isn't a real policeman, or this person is a real police officer, but they've been schooled in what to say, or, I can't tell you exactly where they fit in, but all I can tell you is that is 100% BS, absolute crap, because people who put on a uniform take an oath. And they take an oath to serve the Constitution of the United States of America, or, a duty, right, in law enforcement. They take an oath to the people, and that oath actually means something. And so when we talk about, well, why does a police officer not just, they don't have to enforce the law? Well, to us, that's a simple choice, because we don't take that oath. But the people who actually do take it, who dedicate their lives to that and, put themselves at risk and often get really crappy pay. I don't know what it's like where you are, but a sheriff's deputy in small town in Texas, like where I live, they don't earn a whole lot of money, right? And they don't work the best hours, and so on and so on. So these are very real things. And why am I going on about this? Because once you start to break down these tactics of what are essentially information warfare operations to create and maintain false narratives in order to manipulate and shape and get the outcomes that you want. Once you start to recognize those tactics, they become very, very, very obvious. And the speed with which this massive operation has fallen apart and been exposed, just the fact that journalists are writing at length about all the FBI agents and all the things involved in it. Sure, we're a long way from where we should be, because the lie should never have held even for a day, let alone a year, right? But at the same time, if you look back and you think about other big events that could easily have been operations, such as Charlottesville, right? There's a lot of things that don't add up with Charlottesville, and it's all the same players. It is all the same players. And, when I looked at the footage of January 6th, as it was happening, I could identify Antifa operatives in the crowd, and they'll say, oh no, there she goes again, the troll conspiracy theorist, right? There were no Antifa there. None of it has been proved. I don't care what you say. I know what trained agitators of the Black Bloc and other, levels within Antifa, I know how they operate. I know what the tactics are. And I know when I see those tactics in use, and I can distinguish, a lot of the time between a law enforcement type of person, a deep state type of operative, who is in the wrong place, you know, where he obviously shouldn't be, and the kind of Antifa people, right? They have certain signatures in the way that they operate. So I know there were Antifa people there in the crowd, whether they've been identified or not. You know, this is a clandestine. These are clandestine organizations. They rely on deception. So they don't have a card that says, you know, I'm a 3M member of Antifa. Hold on, I just have to kill my dog. Wait. Honey, she stole the cat treats and now she's eating the plastic.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
So that, you know, the one thing I want to say to people, I know I'm talking too long probably, but is that while it's depressing that these things are happening, they should really take heart from the speed and the ferocity, right, with which this lie is just coming apart, and the number of people who are willing to stand up and talk about it. Now, there are still absolutely unforgivable travesties of justice here, and there is still the people responsible for that have not been held to account, and there are American citizens who have been denied due process, who are sitting in off-site correctional facilities, which, you know, that's what they call it, right? You talk to anyone in intelligence and law enforcement and counterterrorism, they'll tell you that's a black site for terror suspects, right? That's the shittiest of the shitty. And so why are American citizens who have never been convicted of a crime being denied due process, and our leaders are silent? I mean, if you want to know how much trouble the Republican Party is in, just think about how few Republican leaders have done or said a single thing about that. That should chill the blood in your veins. And the more, you know, the more committed you are as a conservative or Republican or whatever, the more upset you should be about that, because it tells you everything, like, you know, about potentially how many rhinos might be running in the, you know, the red wave that's coming, right? That's supposed to be coming in the 2022 election, if that even happens. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing I would say about January 6th is just that it was very important to them at that moment to carry out that operation, because the only thing left standing between the truth about the election and the rest of the world was the people. The courts had failed us. The judges had caved to pressure or were corrupt and were weak and had failed us. Our leaders on both sides had failed us. And the only thing that was going to shift the needle, our journalists, right? Our media had failed us. Our experts had failed us. Our election officials, our NGOs, our civil liberties organizations, and so on and so on. All of these institutions had failed us. And the only thing that could have moved the needle, that could pressure the Supreme Court or, you know, any judge to make a real decision or to hear these cases and let this evidence be heard, was the power of the people. And I always knew that from day one, that all of the, you know, the hatred and chaos directed at Donald Trump was never about Donald Trump. That was another information operation that was meant to distract us from the fact that the people were always the target. And if you go back to Hillary Clinton's deplorable speech in the 2016 election, she told us that, didn't she? Because she carved up the people in all these like black boxes, right, of evil, and told us who they were going to target and how they were going to do it. And that's exactly what they have done.
There was a question from the chat. Our friend flipped out, said, "Are all of our leaders just fake?" Yeah, you know, you have to wonder that. You really do.
Are they fake? Well, no. Some of them are corrupt. Some of them are weak. Some of them are cowards. Some of them don't believe that they have a lot of power. What I saw recently in DC was quite interesting. I was asked to speak at a breakfast about Afghanistan, and most of the many of the more established congressmen who were there, I think, just found me, you know, offensive, and a lot of the newer congressmen from maybe less powerful or less institutional, less significant states were very engaged. And what I learned from talking to them is how much pressure they're under. You know, they'll come to Washington as a newbie, right? And you might be idealistic and real and honest and all of those things. And your handlers and your staff around you will get you to do investments or make votes that will set you up to be controlled and manipulated. And you don't even know it's happening. Right? You might be the, oh, okay, I'm the new person on the block and I've got to be a consensus builder and I've got to listen and blah, blah, blah. Right? So, you know, that's kind of amazing that even your own handlers, even your own side, they don't want you to be this big independent voice. If you look at the Media Matters for America, David Brock, their strategic document in the wake of Donald Trump's election, that the Washington Free Beacon, they were the ones who first exposed this, right? They that was being handed out by David Brock and Media Matters at a conference for donors the weekend Trump was being inaugurated. So he wasn't even in office. And if you look at that document, while it's primarily directed at Trump and the right and his supporters, believe me, there is no shortage of information in there about exactly how they will use these tactics, tyrannical tactics, against their own. Should any Democrat normalize Donald Trump or attempt to, you know, break away from and vote differently or whatever, right? I mean, in some respects, the worst is reserved for their own, right? And so, and that obviously applies not as in such a well-organized effort, but there's elements of that on the Republican side as well. And so you get, you know, a bunch of congressmen was saying to me that they didn't think that Lloyd Austin's record qualified him for the position he's in today, and they didn't want to vote for him. But only one of them, Scott Perry, Congressman Perry, he's the only one who had, you know, the cojones to vote with his conscience. The others said, well, if we vote against him, we're going to be targeted as racists and white supremacists, and nobody's going to stand by us, and we're not going to survive that vote. So it's not worth it. And wow, you know, that was like, first of all, it was very human. So on the one hand, I did have more sympathy than I did going in. Secondly, it reminded me that if we want our leaders to have the ability to really lead, we also have to give them the space and the foundation and the support to do that. It's not enough to just bitch and moan about, oh, our leaders are this and our leaders are that. Part of the reason they are that is because their constituents are not defending them when they're falsely accused. How many people want to defend Marjorie Taylor Greene? How many people want to take on Lauren Boebert, right? How many people are rallying around them and supporting them? And I'm not just talking about other leaders. Where is the support from people, right? Because if they think that they're going to, you know, be completely eviscerated and destroyed over this one hill, then it's not worth fighting for. Well, once you start leading like that, you're no longer a leader, right? But it is what we are left with when we are all silent. So in a way, it's partly our fault too, and we can do something about that. That's the good part.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I want to hand it over to Wes for a second. Wes, I know that you had some thoughts on this and possibly a question you wanted to pose. So go right ahead, sir.
Well, a lot of it's been addressed, but I think one of our folks in the chat actually asked something that I was going to ask. Well, this is a good one here. So our friend Flipped Out in the chat is asking, what is this? What in your opinion is this all leading to?
Well, I'm not a prophet, right? And I'm not all seeing and all knowing. So I'm very conscious of the fact that there's much more I don't know than what I really do know and understand, like all of us, right? However, there are some very obvious indicators. Sometimes, you know, we know because we're told, right? I mean, you only have to go to the World Economic Forum and follow what they're doing and saying, and go to the UN and read Agenda 21 and so on, or read the net zero emissions, green, you know, whatever that bill is, right? Or read the infrastructure bill. I mean, they're telling you that we are, you know, if the world, that those with power right now, if they're able to institute that, we are going to a world beyond meat, beyond animals, right? Beyond eating natural food that we ourselves can purchase and grow and, create, produce, to factory produced food from a centralized food supply. So if anyone thinks that I sound, ridiculous, they're not paying attention, right? They're not actually looking at all of this, because there's been a rash of investments in Beyond Meat countries. I think companies, Brazil, someone in Brazil just put, several $100 million into this, and they're one of many. And why is that significant? Well, look at what we're doing on the energy sector. We are committing energy suicide, right? Because we won't approve the Keystone pipeline. We will crush all development in oil and gas in this country. We will crush New Mexico, and so on and so on. But we're going to approve Nord Stream 2, which is the biggest gas pipeline project for Russia and other, nation states and adversaries, right? So those two things mean you cannot be acting from an ideological position and out of principle, because the principle then, is obliterated, right? It doesn't make any sense. Can't say I don't believe in the death penalty, except for this guy. He can die, but not this one. Oh, and she's definitely going to die. But no, I don't believe in the death penalty, right? No, it doesn't work that way. So we know that, right? We know that instinctively. And then we look at what they're telling us. First it was meat, and now they've come up with something else in chickens, and and then it's it's much healthier to eat this Beyond Meat that no one actually knows what's in it, because it's not actually regulated by the USDA and isn't inspected. How do I know that? Because I know people who are USDA meat inspectors, and they've told me that. This is the only food substance we consume that we have absolutely no idea what's in it. It's unregulated. Now they're in talks, and it will be regulated. And, maybe I'm a couple of weeks out of date or something. I don't think so, but correct me if I'm wrong. But why is that significant? Well, they will argue they want it to be labeled meat because it's grown from meat cells in a factory. And so they say it is meat. But they want us, basically, what does that mean? They want us not to know what it is we're eating, right? So that we can be fed whatever somebody else wants to feed you. And how does that relate to energy and gas? Well, gas, the price of natural gas is driving up the price of fertilizer. The price of fertilizer is making production extremely limited for countries like Russia and China, and for all countries. And so they're limiting exports. And what is all of this doing? Well, it's already led to severe food shortages in Ghana. And a number of people that I've talked to say we're heading into a period of global famine. So if you wonder, right, global famine, we've never had global famine. We've had famine in Ethiopia, for those of you who are old enough to remember Live Aid, right? But we've never had global famine all at the same time. And when you look at the global pandemic in our lifetimes, for most of us, we've never had a global health problem, right? That we have to solve on a global scale. Otherwise, it can never be solved. That's what our leaders are telling us. And what else do they say that about? Well, they say that as well about, climate change, right? No, it's got to be a global solution for the whole planet. And what about a universal basic income? Well, that's got to be the whole planet too. What about a health passport, digital health passport? Well, that's got to be global too, right? China even offered at one of the World Economic Forum conferences, China actually offered to run that program for the world.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't make that up. That's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, these are, what about a global minimum corporate tax, right? These are proposals that Janet Yellen and other world leaders and financial leaders and so on, they're busy implementing these things. They're not theoretical. They're implementing them. And when you look at what they've done at the UN, if you look at the Global Compact on Migration, so you want to understand what's happening with the southern border, well, look no further than the Global Compact on Migration at the UN. What do they say? It says exactly what Biden and Psaki and Mayorkas and all the rest of them say, that migration is a human right. So we've created a human right that is not the same as a God-given right enshrined in the Constitution. It is a human right that we create. And why is that significant? Well, because they don't talk about a crisis on the southern border, do they? No, they've never acknowledged that it's a crisis, and they don't even say it's a problem, because it is not. To them, it is safe, orderly migration. We have regular and irregular waves of what is orderly migration of people exercising their basic human rights. And this now apparently supersedes sovereign rights, the rights of American citizens in their own land, and so on and so on, right? And why is that even more significant? Well, because when you go back to climate, they have said that there will be 1.2 billion refugees on the move because of climate change. So they've already set the stage for 1.2 billion people to be on the move as refugees. And as we now know, we don't have a southern border anymore. We don't believe in border security apparently in the United States, because I don't see the country and the media, I don't see leaders up in arms over the fact that this administration bypassed Congress and implemented an open border policy driven by their open border ideologues that has never ever been voted on by the American people. And I've been covering the border for years and years and years now. And I have found universally, and I think most people will tell you this, that border security is a bipartisan or a nonpartisan issue in many respects, right? And in fact, all along the Rio Grande and in the Valley and all that, where most of the people and border agents are Hispanic Americans, they all believe in border security. Well, mostly, right? Most people do. And so we've never had that national conversation about the fact that the border is wide open. We don't even talk about it. But when you listen to the leaders, they use the exact same language that is used by the UN. Then you look at the fact that the administration put UN monitors on the southern border to monitor our own law enforcement agents, right? To ensure that our migratory policies were in line with the UN's and the international standard that they've now set. Oh, and by the way, this is interesting. There's a young reporter on the border who found a guide that had been put together by the UN, by UNICEF, I think it was, or IOM, I can't remember. And it was basically a laminated, well-prepared, well-made guide for people, telling them how to navigate their way through all of the countries across the world to reach the United States. So that is not seeking asylum in the next neighboring country where you can be safe. That is a guide to how you can get to America. And we really have to ask a very serious question of the UN and of our leaders. Why is there a human right to migrate that now is just a pathway to America's door? Because we all know that all of these systems that were set to collapse even before we let more than 2 million refugees into this country in the last fiscal year. And by the way, where do we stand now in this fiscal year, which starts, runs October right to October? That's the fiscal year. The first 3 months, we already surpassed 500,000 apprehensions and gotaways. Those are the people that were hit on the sensor and just disappeared and were never apprehended. They're now in kind of a 1-for-1 ratio. That is, unheard of. And it's happening all across the southern border. So you're talking about, roughly 1 million people in the first 3 months of this year. And last year broke all records, right? In history, right? So no one's addressing these things. So where are we heading? Well, the last piece of this, there are many other pieces to it, but we're heading for a world where, look at what they say about defund the police. Oh, we don't need the police. We need social services. Oh, right. Because social services, they have so much oversight, right? They're so much better trained than the police to handle difficult and volatile situations. And it only takes 3 phone calls to get a social services investigation into someone. They can even be anonymous. And those people have the authority to show up on your door. You don't even know you're under investigation. And they can have a warrant from a judge to take your children from you, right? And you can spend a year, 2 years fighting just to get your children back. And if you don't think that's real, let me tell you, it's happening. When I have done a lot of coverage on Antifa, and I see them on their social media platforms, calling on each other to make calls, singling out a person, describing them and their behavior, and calling on each other to make calls to social services to report them. I interviewed a woman who happened to be a Black woman who was married to a white man, and they had mixed race kids. And she spoke at a Trump rally right after the 2016 election on nonviolent conflict resolution. There was a Black kid on the stage, and they managed to get her reported. She was put under investigation. The assumption was made that that child was hers, and the accusation was she'd endangered their life because Texas is open carry, and there were people at the rally that had guns. That was not her child. Her children were not there, but she was under investigation for 1.5 years. Her children, who I interviewed, and who all, by the way, spoke publicly at the city council, it's on record, right? Their story and their statements. They slept in her closet for 1.5 years. Their lives were torn to shreds, and all to punish her for daring, to have the audacity to speak at a Trump rally. Right? These are the tactics of tyranny that are being used against us. The social services and the NGOs, all of these affinity groups that, as they call them, they act like the brown shirts and the SS. They are the ideological incubators of these radical ideologies, but they're also building up networks of loyalty, right? And they're doing it all over the world globally. And that's when technology comes in, because now what they're doing is taking over the world without firing a shot, right? So we're already a long way into this takeover. We're in the end game now. You can see from the speed with, everything is accelerating because the lies are coming apart and they're being exposed and they're being counted in many ways. Donald Trump, my personal belief is that Donald Trump's role was to expose them, that was what he was really meant to do. Because, if you are building a network, right? If you want to map out the network, say you're doing a conspiracy case, a RICO case against the mob, right? Or whatever it happens to be, against narco traffickers or child traffickers and so on. If you move too quickly, part of the network goes underground and you never find them, especially the more protected people. So when you are dealing with something like we've been dealing with, that is on the scale where you can have the Justice Department and the FBI, law enforcement acting as betraying their oath and acting as a political weapon to be wielded against your own people, that is not small. It doesn't represent every agent. And actually, the number of ideologues is always very tiny, but it represents a lot of power and money and infrastructure, right?
Exactly.
And so, yes. And so when you move against that, you can't just move. You don't just randomly show up and arrest Joe Biden and, Obama and Hillary, right? It doesn't work like that. You really have to be methodical, and you have to be very careful, and you have to map out the whole network. And every step you take, every move you make, they're going to make a counter move, right? And so you have to take that into account as well. But if they get their way, we are moving into a world where we have a digital currency. There is no more paper money, no more coins. There's no Bitcoin, because there cannot be a competitive currency, right? So it will be, you have to have that vaccine, because you have to have a digital identity. You have to have a digital passport so they can institute a digital currency. And the technology will be our intelligence, their intelligence and apparatus, and also their enforcement apparatus. But it will have, but the NGOs, you look at them all across the world. Why are we, through USAID and other entities, funding, transgenderism in Afghanistan, where they don't even have women's rights? Why are you doing that? Because you're creating your local government, your loyal networks, your actual, governing infrastructure on the local level. You've already built that up and created it. And you've already got the structures, the global structures that will run that on a global level. And by the way, in case, again, for all the people who think I'm some conspiracy theorist and I'm full of nonsense, take a look at what Tony Blinken said. It's exactly what Obama said. The world doesn't need any one nation telling other nations what to do, right? They don't believe, there are people who do not believe that the world is served by having America as a superpower, or even having America as a sovereign nation. So when people ask me, why would it doesn't make any sense that the Biden administration would willingly and unforced create the biggest narco terrorist super state in the history of the world in Afghanistan. Like, how can that be true? Like, surely if we could get our weapons back from them, we would, right? If we'd known that the Taliban was going to do this, we would never have done that. Why would we? Because allowing the Taliban to have all our technology and our intelligence operatives and obliterating the American idea of the right to live free and destroying American honor and eviscerating, the reputation of the U.S. military and, so on and so on and so on, right? Betraying our allies, weakening us strategically, blah, blah, blah. How would any of that make sense? Well, it only makes sense if you want to give your enemies the ability to weaken you and take away your power, but you don't want to be accountable for it, right? So you do it in that kind of context. And Obama was doing it, and the same people in his administration that were in his administration are in the Biden administration. So we're heading for a world where we have no private ownership of land, no private ownership of cars, driverless electric transportation systems, no global travel, no, we don't have agriculture. We're beyond meat, beyond animals. We eat some, nonsense that they create only in a factory, like, protein bars. And we don't have freedom of thought, let alone freedom of speech. We're controlled by a small group of puppet masters and powerful elites who have the ability and the will, and apparently no conscience, to just obliterate anyone and anything that gets in their way. And we will serve them, right? We are the servants of that class. And part of what we serve is the technology, because the AI, the algorithms, the robots, the data, all of that needs human beings, because none of it is actually renewable or sustainable. GM modified seeds, they're done at the end of one season, one harvest. Right. And wind turbines, they die. They have a shelf life. They have to be remade. Data, it has to be cooled, right? It has to be kept at a constant cool temperature. That needs water. That needs human beings, robots. All of that stuff dies. The only truly renewable source of anything on Earth is life, and we didn't create that.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're spot on, Laura. And here's the thing. All right. You've noticed a pattern, I'm sure. Wes noticed a pattern, I'm sure. I've noticed a pattern. The scene is played over and over in all these other countries. You see it in Australia. You see it in Germany. You see it. I had a source call me from Spain, told me they are now on the digital QR code, Vax passport, and outside masking. It seems to be uniform. It's going all along these countries. They're falling like dominoes into this, flat out blatant authoritarianism. And it's too much of a coincidence to just say, oh, well, that's isolated. It's one country. No, that's all of a sudden 3 countries. And then you see it in other countries, even beyond those. So it's all falling under the same system. So you have to say, well, there's a pattern here. Okay. And then you start to really put it together. And then you listen to comments like from Klaus Schwab, or you hear these people talk like, what's the next big thing coming? Oh, cyber attacks. That's what's coming next. Or
they tell you what's coming next.
Yeah.
They telegraph it.
It's crazy.
Drew, the thing about it is, though, look, when they shut down the whole world with COVID, that was the most coordinated thing that we've ever seen in our lifetimes. They managed to do it everywhere. And we've become so isolated geographically. And I think with 5G, we're going to be even more isolated, right? Because 5G allows the speed of the technology allows them to really create anything they want, and it's not even discernible to the human eye, right? We can't even see when things are being altered right in front of us. And so that gives them the ability to really isolate you further. And if you start to think, well, how are they going to get rid of global airline travel if they're going to go to zero net emissions? Because no biofuel is able to sustain the airline industry as it exists today, right? No, there's no, ethanol or biofuel that is going to do a transatlantic flight. My family's in South Africa, so I'm very concerned about this, because will I ever see my family again, right? Or will I be restricted to seeing them once every 10 years? Or I don't know, right? Will I even have the ability, any say in that? So these are things that really, that I've looked at because they really concern me. And what you don't see in that picture, this is why free media and independent thought is so critical. What you don't see is a lot of coverage on, for example, the president of Tanzania, who at the time was a doctor, and who said, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. He one of many doctors in the world. And what did he do? He asked for 10 COVID tests. And then he had them wipe like an apple and a goat and a table and so on and so on. And of course, he got back 9 positive COVID tests. And he said, right, I knew it. I knew that this was, that there was something nefarious going on here, that it wasn't as presented. And of course, unfortunately, that man is now dead. I don't know the circumstances of his death. People have, raised serious questions about it. And I think the truth is not yet known. And I'm not saying it was nefarious, but of course it is, it is remarkable that here's the one leader that stood up to the rest of them, withdrew his country from the World Health Organization, and really acted on principle, and he's not around anymore. But why do I raise that? Because yes, on the one hand, it's very important to understand and know what you're up against. And the level of coordination does tell you a lot. And it shows you how powerful these people are. But on the other hand, even with all of that power, they still don't have the most powerful thing of all on their side, which is the truth, right? I mean, it's all based on lies. And so while it's the David and Goliath fight, we may not have access to all of that money. We may not have any power. We may not have the platform. You may not have the 13, 14, 15, 16 million viewers that we used to have at 60 Minutes on every show, on almost every show, right? But we have the only thing they don't have, which is the truth. It's the only thing that counts.
Amen.
The only thing that counts. In the end, it's the truth that will prevail, right? So that doesn't, what it means is that all that power and money and everything else that they have, and infrastructure and organization and coordination and all the other tactics, what that means is that this is going to be a death fight, right? It's going to cost us. It's not going to be easy, and it's not, already hasn't been quick. And that's all it means. It doesn't mean they're going to win. So don't surrender.
Well, it's
so
go ahead, Wes. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So I mean, these people that are behind it, the powers behind it, the World Economic Forum and such and thus. I mean, how did they come to these conclusions? Is this? Are we going to write the history about this, and we're going to say this is groupthink gone amok? That these people are so isolated that they've just come up with these strange notions that they should run the world? Or did their mothers not tell them they loved them when they were kids? I mean, is it a lust for power?
That's it, Drew. I mean, it's, very often the simple answer right in front of you is really the whole answer. I mean, it's no different to anyone before them who's ever wanted to rule the world. And there's a long line of people that care about that. I wasn't built that way. It's not in my DNA. I couldn't care less. I don't want any power. I don't ever want to run for office. I don't want it. I don't even want to run my own company, right? But you don't have to look very far to see that there's no shortage of people who really crave power. And then you factor in corruption, and then, lack of moral courage and all of the other things that go with it, and basic human nature, where most people are followers. And then, beyond that, what's really interesting about this is the length of time tells you a lot, right? A lot of these things, you didn't take over most of the colleges in America and turn them into re-education camps or indoctrination facilities overnight. That happened over decades. And that is probably one of the most significant things to understand and acknowledge, because it tells you about not the breadth of the enemy, but the depth, right? It tells you that they have been working on this for a very long time. And, you know, something really interesting, there's a lot of things that we just believe along the way. Like, you know, we all just believe that this one crazy guy called Ahmed Chalabi, who was, you know, an Iraqi immigrant in the diaspora, somehow persuaded a U.S. administration to go to war in Iraq. And he was just a bad guy who lied to them, right? No,
I
not
don't
true.
buy that.
Right, not true. But at the time, we all bought into that narrative. Honestly, how stupid could we be, right? Obviously, that did not happen that way. So one of the many false narratives that we just don't question is why at the end of World War II did we allow and make it possible for all of these top Nazis to leave Nazi Germany and come and work in the United States in positions of real significance and power, such as, let's see, the head of Nazi intelligence became one of the people that actually set up the CIA. I mean, does nobody think, wait, you just fought the Second World War. Let's think about how many people were lost. Let's think about the level of suffering and what it took, right? And so at the end of the war, who comes up with the idea to say, all of our most talented enemy, all you Nazis, we've got a really great program for you. Your scientists can go to NASA. You can help us set up our intelligence agencies. You can become the G2 at the Pentagon. You can be doing this. I'm sorry. Why have we never questioned that? We read the CIA finders documents, which lay out this whole program, but we never question whether or not that program was ever part of the Nazi plan. Yeah, I'm not saying that it was, right? I don't have, I'm not saying to you that it was. I'm just saying that as a journalist, when I start to try to understand and unwind some of these things and understand how we got here and where we're headed and who's responsible and so on, and who are the puppet masters, who are the real power, what you start to see is that there's a lot of ridiculous notions that we have just accepted as fact and have been built into, I think Dinesh D'Souza calls it, some of these, he's got a better word for it, but these kind of accepted truths, right?
Yeah, it was built into normalcy. It was built into normalcy. But if you
go to the Nuremberg trials, and you tell me when you read the testimony of one Nazi after another on, who's on the stand, they are not saying, we're sorry, we're defeated, and they're not repentant. Many of them are saying it's not over, aren't they? I mean, so what did they mean by that? What did they really mean by that? What is the 1,000-year Reich? Is this part? And I don't mean this in the sense, in the very distorted, misleading sense that we have been manipulated into looking at this issue today, because we have this false idea that on the left you have Antifa or the anti-fascists, and on the right you have the Nazis and right-wingers and white supremacists, and they're the fascists. That is completely not historically accurate. They're both fascists. They were just different groups of fascists vying for power and control, of that movement. And it's very much like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all of these other groups. They all believe in the same ideology. They all share the same goal. They're just fighting for who controls it, who gets what, how is it going to run, who's basically going to have the most power. Right. And so these are very familiar struggles that have played out over and over and over again. And so Osama bin Laden is no different to Hitler, Mussolini, and, the people now who believe in one world, who think that there should be a one world government of a collection of nations who don't have the right to tell anyone else, any other. There's no one nation superpower, right? And they run the world as a global community where there's a global solution to every problem and a global policy that governs all of our lives, and we don't have any rights or any say.
Yeah, don't forget one of their favorite buzzwords too. They all like to cloak these very extreme things in that one neat little word, sustainability.
Oh my gosh. Euphemisms. They're the king.
Hmm.
Well, you know what it is? It's deception, right? That's what it is. It's deception and it's information warfare. So people think that propaganda and information warfare, they often think that those are the same. They're not. Propaganda is just one tool of information warfare. Deception is another. And that's why they hide behind 501c status, right? And charitable status, because they get away with it. They use that to launder money. They use that to enforce and spread radical ideology. They use it basically to steal taxpayer money to implement their ideology. They use it, and most importantly, they use it to deceive the people so that we don't know what's really happening until it's too late for us to do anything about it.
Yeah, it's crazy when you put it all together, because I think back to, when because I'm 47 now. I think back to like even 17 or even 27-year-old me, and if I went back in the past and told myself, man, this is how the world is,
Yeah.
I think my younger self would have laughed at me like, you're on crack, dude. The world is not like that. It's not going to end up like that. And boy, whew, I was naive back then,
You and me both.
it was because we grew up so like, understanding that, people by and large were good, and this, something of this scale couldn't happen in the world, or so we were conditioned to think.
No,
But then,
people are good. People
yeah,
by and large are good, though. That's the thing, is those two things don't necessarily go together. Something on this scale can happen because the reality is that evil really does exist. However, you only have to look at January 6th and at, those fences around the Capitol and all the rest of it to see that what they really fear is the good in people, right? Because the people who are deceiving you, the people who are taking away your rights and your civil liberties and lying about it, the people who are lying about medical treatments and that they're saying are not harmful when they know that there's growing evidence of a lot of harm that's being caused. And you can argue that that's a small amount, but they don't like that argument when you say, well, COVID deaths are a small amount, right? So you see that people using these tactics for, very for evil ends, right? For nefarious ends, they really do exist. However, they're outnumbered, because if they weren't, they wouldn't need to do the things that they're doing.
yeah,
They wouldn't.
yeah, exactly. And they seem to be doing it with more urgency, because obviously we've seen the speed of things pick up. I mean, if you look at how quickly, God, just the turnaround time on when they put those camps in to Australia and into Germany. I mean,
Stunning.
they went up ridiculously fast.
Well, look
you
how
know.
fast the Biden administration has been moving to obliterate the economy and the
Right.
police and the school system and and so and so on and so on, right? I mean, it's just like nobody knows which way to turn. I mean, one minute you're worried about what Google is serving up your child just on a search engine, because we can sit next to each other and get completely different search results. and their power is just unbelievable. The next minute you're worrying about what they're being taught in school. The next minute you're having to worry about, wait a minute, the Atlantic just did an article that said the nuclear family was a mistake. What? So now even the family itself is a mistake. Then, you know, you look into that and you find, oh, wait a minute, apparently all forms of parental power are a form of abuse. There's actually money and infrastructure and spokespeople for that. And then at the same time, you know, your children are like, I'm scared to ask this person in the store for help. Well, why? Well, because I don't want to say, ma'am, can you help me? And then, you know, be offending someone because maybe they're not really a woman. And, you know, suddenly your children, they don't even know, they can't even believe what's right in front of their eyes. Right. And then at the same time, you've got what's happening on the border. And then never mind, you've got, you know, you've got fentanyl, which is the most deadly street drug in history, that is being mixed into every other kind of drug and is now the leading cause of death for Americans from age 18 to 45, fentanyl overdoses. And you've got, you know, as much fentanyl, more fentanyl was picked up on the southern border in November in 1 month than the whole of the last fiscal year. So, and nobody's worried about that. Oh, wait, why? Because this administration is actually moving to reduce the minimum mandatory sentences for illegal narcotics. And then, wait a minute, they're over here, they're trying to actually legalize all of those drugs. So, you know, not saying that I have a moral position on it, but as a mother with children who are being, you know, exposed, like every kid, just every second kid is vaping around them, you know, how long before there's fentanyl in vape? Maybe it's already in there. It probably is actually. My you know,
there's fiberglass and crazy stuff in those though.
Right. And so that's before you've even gotten to what is happening with fertilizer and food and gas and energy. And oh, wait, the IRS now wanting to track your bank accounts, or bank accounts being closed because, you know, Chase Bank doesn't like your politics. Right. Or before you even get to the FBI being used as a political weapon, where these days, apparently, you know, you can be thrown in prison for just about anything under the sun and never see the light of day, right? And nobody's going to say a word. And then never mind being canceled, you know, out on social media, or the control that technology is taking over our lives. This is the last year for the fully combustible engine. It's now going to, and then it's going to be hybrids. And oh, by the way, did you read the infrastructure bill? And every vehicle is going to be tracked, you know, on a grid. And so what,
and we're also going to be taxed on the mileage we drive too.
So what are they doing? What is the effect of that? They want you to drive less. Why do they want you to drive less? Oh, because we want to save the planet from your gas. Is it really because of that? Or is it because you're geographically isolating us? Mosques, they isolate us from each other, right? Reduced air travel isolates us geographically. Now, when we're no longer allowed to own gas cars, or they're using the same tactics, by the way, that the Ottoman Empire used against Christians when it conquered Christian and Jewish territory. They would do certain battles, of course, and take, you know, what they needed to by force. But then what they used to finish the conquest was the jizya, which is the tax. And I had this explained to me by a Kurdish man actually once in northern Iraq, because I really didn't understand. I said to him, you know, aren't you Muslim? And he said, no. And I said, oh, you know, I don't know why I assumed that. And he said, well, you assumed it because what they really did with us here in, you know, what used to be ancient Mesopotamia, now northern Iraq, is, he said, they basically taxed us into extinction. And I said, how? And he said, well, you know, when they come in and when they're learning and they're figuring out who owns what and how does it run, and, you know, and all the rest of it, and how to take over, they're taxing you, but your taxes can go up and up and up and up and up. So if you're a farmer or a business owner, you know, once your taxes are so high, you can't pay them. Well, then you give them some of your land, and then you give them some more of your land, and then you've got no land left, and then you've got no assets to give. And then by the end of it, you know, you either convert to Islam and stop paying the tax, or you're just, you know, impoverished. And that is what that's the strategy with cows. There's going to be a methane tax, right? So if you have a herd of about 800 cows, I think your methane tax bill at one point under the Green New Deal, I don't know what the latest proposal says, but when I reported on this, your instant tax bill overnight, just for methane alone, was an additional 1.5 million, which we all know no small farmer can sustain that, especially not on top of all the other regulations and taxes as they've been
Absolutely.
burdening everybody. So what is that about? Well, obliterating small farms is the same as obliterating small businesses. I mean, those are the backbone of the American dream. That ability to move from the working class to the middle class, or lower middle class to upper middle class, or to wealthy, right? The hope that you can improve your life, that the power to change your life and improve it rests with you and your hard work and your labor, your innovation, your intellect, your integrity. You can do it, right? It doesn't matter if you have no connections. It doesn't matter if you don't have this and you don't have that. Well, that is what is being eviscerated here, because you cannot have that in a society in which there is absolute control and there is no social advancement, whether it's Marxism or communism or some kind of totalitarian, technological dystopia, right? You cannot have that. You have to kill hope, because when you have hope, right, you don't comply, and when you don't comply, you don't have absolute control. And so that's the reason for the speed, is that we are reaching a point where every single day more of the lies are falling apart and being exposed, and more people are waking up and standing up, and so on and so on. And what we're seeing, a tiny fraction of the Black population is vaccinated. Oh, so that can't be a white supremacist issue alone, right? Wait, it's a Black mother who went to the school councils and eviscerated them in California, who's a hero of mine, by the way, who got them to fire the teacher that had the Antifa flag on the wall.
I saw that. Yeah.
I love
That's
that
great.
woman. I love that woman. So what does that mean?
That's
Oh,
my
well,
old
that's
neighborhood.
not a white supremacist Trump issue, redneck racist issue either, right? So over time, the lies, because they're not based on anything solid. They have no legs. So they're falling apart. And as they fall apart, what you're looking at is these people who have so much power and so much money, right? Jeff Bezos just gave $100 million to the Obama Foundation. The Obama Foundation, these are the same people that were the architects of the Safe Cities Initiative, another UN initiative under Valerie Jarrett and Obama, that laid out community alternatives to policing. Does that sound familiar? That was a long time before defund the police. Why was Obama so annoyed when people said defund the police? Because it did away with the deception, and it revealed what their true intent was. And that was not a successful strategy. So I'll finish this point. Sorry. Is why is that so important? Well, because these are the very same people. These narratives have been built in over time, and the policies and the infrastructure around them have been built. And if we had gone from 8 years of Obama into 8 years of Hillary, we may never have seen another Republican administration again after that, right?
I don't think we would have. I think you're exactly right about that. And if you remember, and we talk about the huge shift in just the nature of politics. Just remember how politics was beforehand, and then when it was intentionally shifted to the identity politics model, that was intentional 100%.
Oh yeah, it's the politics of division is all it is, right? If they want us to focus on what divides us, rather than focus on what unites us, because the truth is that what holds us together, all of us, is much more powerful than anything that divides us. So while there are very real things dividing us, right? There are very real issues, genuine injustices, and so on, that have to be addressed. And that should be addressed. And that, by the way, most people want to address. Those things are very, very real, but they are not all that exists. And we have been manipulated and directed to focus on those things that divide us, and to forget about all the things that unite us. And that's the same as the geographic isolation and division, the politics of division, you know, whether it's race or something else. And the reality is, you know what? My kids are growing up and they've been surrounded by all of this, and they couldn't care less what color you are, what sexual orientation you are, and so on and so on. But there is no mistaking the boys from the girls. There are natural traits. And so, you know, my child, when they come up with cisgender to replace birth gender, you know, this kid looks at me and he's like, oh my gosh, Ma, have you seen the latest? Right? Look at what they're doing. They want you to forget that there is such a thing, that you're born a certain way. They don't want you to know that. And I'm looking at him thinking, phew, thank goodness he can see that, right? But think about that. He's not the only one. You cannot stop this. You cannot stop it. That is why tyranny always collapses in the end. But
Yes.
we have never been in a position where they really have the ability. Facebook reaches 3.5 billion people across the planet. They really have the ability this time to hold on to that power and implement their strategy in a way that will cost us. We may never, you know, we may never see the end of that fight, right? And so that's why it's a race. We're in a race now to see whether they can fully implement it to the point where it's going to take so much to change course and protect the things that we, you know, that are so critical to all of us, like the right to live free, right? Equal protection under the law, you know, everything that's enshrined in the Constitution. You know, I have no doubt that the good will prevail over evil, but you can
I think
see,
so too.
you can see from the speed with which things are moving that this is our last opportunity before, you know, it's wow, before it's really entrenched, and then it's going to take, you know, who knows how long to turn around.
Well, yeah, you know, and I think you're dead on right, Lara, because pardon my French, but they're scared shitless right now of us.
Yes, they are.
You know,
and they don't want you to know, because if you don't believe you have any power, you won't ever exercise it. And that's why January 6th was so important. We have to scare the people and intimidate them into not using their power so that we can get them to surrender it, to give it up, because surrender is the only form of victory that cannot be taken. It has to be given.
I know Wes is going to, he's probably got a thought on this, and then he'll probably throw a couple questions from the chat your way, and then we'll get on to our next subject here in a second. But go ahead, Wes.
I'm taking it in. I've just, this is great. I mean, it's, you know, you're so eloquent in how you're going over the plans of the globalists. I just, man, where to even follow up with that? So, I mean, what does a victory? Oh, I've got so many questions going through my head that I want your take on, but I guess I'll start with a simple one. Did Trump underestimate the evil that he was up against?
I don't know. I suspect that we really have a very narrow understanding of what has been going on. I know for a fact that there has been a lot happening in a clandestine way on both sides that we are not aware of, and that things are not always as they seem, right? So, for example, Durham, you know, why did he not act sooner? How far is Durham going to go? And why didn't Trump declassify everything and burn it all to the ground, you know, before he left office? Well, people who do this kind of thing for a living, who work in intelligence and other areas, have taught me before that sometimes the answer is not what it appears, right? So, like, for example, U.S. intelligence, we may think that their job is the same as law enforcement. They don't necessarily see it that way. So if they're mapping a terrorist network and they know that there's going to be a terrorist attack, but no American citizens are at risk, law enforcement will, is not supposed to allow that terrorist attack ever to happen. But if you are an intelligence agency and your job is to dismantle the terrorist network, maybe you let that attack play out. Because if you don't, if you move to stop it, you're going to lose the last, I don't know how many years and billions of dollars of work and contacts and sources and everything. And that whole network is going to go underground. And that's what I was referring to before when I said, I think Trump's primary job in a way was to get people to expose themselves. And I wonder about that with the election too, because, they always say the cover up is worse than the crime. And it doesn't fully make sense, but I do have questions about, why would you allow voting machines and records to be, to be wiped out, to be eradicated, right? Why would you allow that to happen? Well, maybe you didn't have the complete power to stop it, but also maybe you allow that to happen because once it's been erased and you can prove that it's been erased, you can prove the cover up, which helps you prove the crime. And that whole issue of election fraud is not done. And, I know it's a career-ending move to even address the fact that millions of people in this country are absolutely certain that the election was stolen and millions of people say it wasn't. However, what I point to is the documentary that was done right after the 2016 election, in which was all Democrats, many of them, some very significant ones, all talking about the fact that the voting machines are connected to the internet, that they are not secure, that there are backdoors in the software that allow anyone to come in and alter, add people, phantom voters, and delete them, insert, AI algorithms that they need to run vote fraud, and can leave without any without being detected, right? I know that there are independent and cyber analysts and democratic cyber analysts that said all of this before the 2020 election, and people can find there's a very well done documentary actually all about that, but it's not the only thing, right? And there's other there's experts that you can find, some of them at universities, some not, who speak to this. You can look at Dr. Robert Epstein, who did the film The Creepy Line, right? Who literally studied how Google determined who would win the election in India, right? And, nobody has to look very far to see the partnership between big tech and big government, especially when it comes to the left. And I know there are people who believe that, big tech works against the left just as much. And of course that happens too, right? I'm sure if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter and big tech is in the tank for, Biden or Hillary, I'm sure you get subjected to, censorship and other things as well. However, what you're really looking at when you put all of those pieces together tells you that there's a lot we don't know. And I would love to have the answers to that. I know that many people want those answers, right? But there's some things with Trump that just don't add up. And I suspect, well, some things I know I can't talk about yet. I know that there are significant security issues that have been in play, and that when you move, against, like, you go and arrest a whole bunch of very, very powerful people, you could trigger, for example, a dirty bomb attack, right? Mm-hmm. You could trigger an EMP. You could trigger, any kind of thing, any kind of response. And so while we look at it and say, it's outrageous, why didn't they do this? And why didn't they do that? Their consideration can be different. So maybe Durham didn't move for so long because there was some housekeeping that needed to be done to reduce some very significant security threats. And then Durham was able to move. And maybe Durham is being very deliberate in how he's moving, because you want that whole network mapped before you move so that it doesn't go to ground and you don't lose the most powerful.
Yeah, this is an interesting comment. Lefts who are funded by big tech attacked Dave Logan of Cyber Ninjas for the Arizona audit. and he is $2.5 million in debt trying to defend himself. Whew. Interesting.
I don't know, I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know. I can't say yes, that's true, or no, it's not true. But what I think with the election, though, what's really it's really unhelpful to concentrate on and be directed towards like the individual messengers, right? Because the strategy has been kill the messenger and look no further. And so what we all see and what we know around us, right? We know that with phantom voters and AI and shutting down the vote counting, that was, that's how it's done most effectively and to scale. And you don't have to look very hard to see that there has not been a lot of support on either side of the aisle to get to the bottom of this. And, the logical question that follows from that is, that both sides are guilty, right? How deeply involved are you? How deeply involved are you? How corrupt have all our elections been?
Yeah, it really begs the question: how far back exactly does that go? Because after you observe this, boy, you really ask that question. It really makes you think, and that's what I think all of us, and I say this collectively, you and I and Wes, people that ask these type of questions, that exercise pre-thought, that really try to chase down facts and get to the core of what this is. Because to me, it's fascinating, but at the same time alarming, and it is the greatest, indeed the greatest story of our time, really, when you get down to it. And as a journalist, I mean, how could you not want to chase the facts and get to the truth of all of this? Because it's fascinating if it wasn't so alarming. And the fact that we had to do what we have to do to protect ourselves, obviously, but and I know someone in the chat had asked earlier, do you ever fear for your own safety in these times?
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, right? I'm a mom, and it's much harder when you are not running around some distant battlefield and you don't have children to worry about. And you're not at home, right? I mean, this comes right to my door. And I find it amusing that I get Antifa, a death threat from Antifa, for example, that mirrors exactly, like the Daily Beast and media hit pieces on you, right? It's the same narrative. What does that tell you? But they're mailing it to your front door, and it's very targeted and very pointed, and I would be irresponsible as a mother if I didn't take those things into account. But at this point, like, let's make a list of the people who if they have a hit list of journalists, I'm right at the top, right? On my list you can put the cartels, i.e. most powerful and violent transnational criminal organizations ever to exist. You've got the most powerful leaders in America. You have the puppet masters of all of this stuff that you're seeing. Well, I just added Dr. Fauci. He really hates me. And you can pretty much go down the list. We left the presidential palace in Afghanistan once, in Kabul, and I never forget my cameraman, producer, and a very close friend looked at me and said, "Well, that's another world leader off your Christmas card list, then." And so I'm very much, when you follow the facts and the truth and you're led by that as opposed to ideology, unfortunately you're going to come up against a lot of different powerful groups. I've been critical of the media, right? No shortage of political operatives and journalists who want me out of the way. And of course, touching anything to do with the election is close to a death sentence. Probably I mean, without a doubt, among the most dangerous stories for anyone to take on, and possibly the most dangerous ever that I've been close to. Child trafficking. Once you really start to dig deep with all of these things, you know, where you're broad and general and superficial and you're on the fringes, it doesn't matter. This is why so many Mexican journalists are being murdered every day by the cartels, and they don't bother too much with the foreign ones, right? Because the beat reporters, the ones who live it and who really know and understand the details and the nuance and the everything else, and who are honing in, they're the ones who are a real threat. And so there's, you know, journalists are killed constantly in Mexico, and yet I've been able to report quite, you know, I mean, quite boldly in lots of different ways. And so far, I'm still breathing. But you know, I gotta touch wood here, right? I don't mean to be flippant about it, because I'm not, and I take the security issues very seriously. It is pot luck that I've survived as long as I have. But as that same person actually said to me once, you know, I prefer to make my own luck. Or I think the smarter I am, the luckier I get, is what he said to me once on our way into Afghanistan. And so I try to be thoughtful about it, and I try to be smart about it. But the truth is that when they really come for you, I don't think there's a whole lot that you can do. I think you're pretty screwed.
All right. So
Probably true.
So topic shift, guys, because I really want to share this with you, and this in something, you know, that Laura mentioned about a certain gentleman that's probably off her Christmas card list. I want to share this this clip, and you know, because I put this out on Twitter, you know, just a day or so ago, and you guys have to see this. I mean, this is unbelievable. So let me just go ahead and share this up, because this is whoa. So, all right, let's watch this.
The most ridiculous, majestic.
Hey, there we go.
COVID-1 clearly originated in China, and we were fortunate to escape a major pandemic. So we really had to learn a lot more about the viruses that were there, about whether or not people were getting infected with bad viruses. So in a very minor collaboration, as part of a subcontract of a grant, we had a collaboration with some Chinese scientists. And what he conflated that is that therefore we were involved in creating the virus, which is the most ridiculous, majestic leap I've ever heard of.
Yeah, sure. So
Wow.
I mean, right there. Did he just really say we had an agreement?
Did he just admit that they were involved in the gain of function research that created the virus?
We had an agreement with Chinese. Whoops.
You know what this is called? Okay, so this is another tactic of information warfare. And I'll give you two really good examples of where this was done in the past. So do you remember, not long after Trump was elected, Ben Rhodes, the former deputy national security advisor under Susan Rice in the Obama administration, did a lengthy article and interview with the New York Times Magazine. And it was a fascinating report all about the Iran deal and all the backdoor dealings. He admitted that they had been negotiating with the mullahs long before they admitted it publicly. That was in violation of US law. He admitted that they lied to the American people. He admitted and even exposed that they used these idiot journalists that don't, fact check anything, that they consider just their patsies, and that they proliferated their, the false justification and the deception operation. Basically, they used them to implement that, and so on and so on and so on, right? And it was a very damning. The revelations were very damning. So you look at this and you think, why? Why on earth would Ben Rhodes self-incriminate? Why would he come out and admit to doing all of these very nefarious things dishonest things, illegal things, and so on and so on. The reason is this is how they control the narrative, right? Because they do it on their terms. They package it their way, and they fire first because nobody wins on defense. You win on offense. And where else did they do that? Let me see. Do you remember the leak about Rod Rosenstein, who, when he was, I think, acting attorney general at the time, it came out in the New York Times, big scoop, right? Rod Rosenstein asked the people who were being interviewed by President Trump to replace James Comey, who were going to the White House, to the Oval Office, to meet with the President of the United States in a secure, compartmentalized information facility, otherwise known as a SCIF, where everything is classified, that they were asked by Rod Rosenstein and agreed to wear a wire to basically entrap the President of the United States. What? Why would they do that? Who would leak that to the New York Times? Was Rod, that immediately becomes the whole story, is who leaked it? How did they get New York Times get this leak? Instead of us saying, oh, I see. So they know that most of the media is going to carry their message. So they can therefore act pretty much with impunity. They know that they can control that narrative. They can control to a degree how much coverage it gets, and then they can kill it. And then it's done. And the truth is that there are intrepid journalists across all of the mainstream media and legacy media, whatever you want to call it, and new media, who, if they were to uncover some of these things on their own and do their own independent reporting, it wouldn't go so well for these people, right? So they make sure that those journalists never get a chance, and they control that narrative. Now that extends, I mean, I said to you, I'd give you two examples. Maybe the most significant example of all in recent times is the Times Magazine article about the people and the operation to save American democracy in 2020, which laid out a lot of the fraud in the election, right? And a lot of the people involved. But once again, they use deception, right? And euphemisms and a different spin to present the information in a certain way. So they say now, Mark Zuckerberg, he didn't put all those, mail-in ballot boxes, with no chain of custody and so on every street corner in Detroit and Atlanta and all these other places, right? He didn't do that to steal the election and pervert the election. He did it to save the election. Well, guess what? They fired first. They've gone on offense. They've established the narrative. And now anyone else has to prove, they have to disprove that. And they have to prove, oh, no, it wasn't for that. It wasn't for a good purpose. It was for a bad purpose. And once you're on the back foot like that, your job just got a whole lot harder. Now, if you extend that out, guess what the other part of this tactic is? Let me see. Benghazi happens, right? So what do? You get rid of as many people who were involved in Benghazi and know what happened as possible. So if you look at it, they've got everyone to sign NDAs, silenced, right? Then they ship them off. They divided up all those teams. They shipped them off to different jobs and postings all over the world. They gave them promotions and they gave them awards. One person I know at the agency wouldn't take his, right? He didn't want it because he knew what it was being given to him for. And then what do? There are a couple that are outside of their complete control. So for two reasons, they then, what do? They make a book. They do a book deal and they do a movie deal, right? But the movie and the book that gets approved is very superficial. It's pretty much a meaningless one because in the case of Benghazi, all it did was confirm the heroics, right? And the drama that we already knew. It made those guys heroes and it gave them a paycheck, right? And it got them quiet. And not only did it do that, but in the bigger picture, it told the story of Benghazi, right? So now we've done the Benghazi movie. We've done the Benghazi book. Now we just move on. And nobody else can get a book or a story made because in the minds of the public and the publishers and in Hollywood and so on, oh, that's been done.
Yeah.
So this is how they control and kill the narratives on all sides. And you see it over and over and over again.
Well, it's funny when people try to say that there isn't a culture war. The print outlet that I write for, and shout out to my boss John Trent and my colleagues at Bounding into Comics. That publication that I write for, now we deal primarily with entertainment. Movies, television, comic books, things of that nature on the print side. And it's funny because when you look at how, especially like the messaging, the woke culture,
Yeah.
the entire thing that
The
is,
shove it down your throat culture.
yeah, and it's not stopped, even though it's proven in the numbers when you look at these movies and they bomb because the public doesn't want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. They continue to keep putting it out because they're willing to even lose money because these people are marching to the narrative. That's all that they care about.
Actually, what it tells you is that it's driven not by economics, right? So normally a company is driven by economics, right? You're in it to maybe do good or maybe provide a service or or whatever, but it has to be economically viable in order to be sustainable. So when you see that happening, it's being driven by politics or by fear or by some other agenda, which means that economically, financially, it's being sustained by some other force, right? And that tells you, that tells you everything that you need to know about how much support they really have, because don't lose sight of the fact that it's failing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you can see it in the numbers when something genuinely good comes out, which is once in a blue moon, those movies skyrocket in numbers. And the usual fare that has all of this agenda-driven nonsense in it is, it tanks and it bombs. It's the same thing with the TV shows, the books, the video games, the whole nine yards that has that kind of narrative in it. They always bomb inevitably. It's crazy.
Yeah, like letting HBO write the finale to Game of Thrones.
Oh,
I mean, that's a perfect example. You just took like one of the greatest series ever made, right, in history. I was such a diehard Thrones fan and looked so forward to that. And then unfortunately, the original author, right? They got ahead of the books. And so then they wrote it and just obliterated it, right? It wasn't worth the toilet paper it was written on.
Yeah. Well, remember when the government bailed out Hollywood? They bailed out Hollywood. They were losing so much money. It's ridiculous. But the culture war is real, and it's funny, the people that continue to deny it. Oh, there's not a culture war. You're just, you're just a 40-year-old straight guy that goes to the movies. What do you know? Well, I know.
Oh, that's a crime. You just committed 4 crimes, by the way. You're sorry. We're gonna have to make a few calls there, Drew. Call the brown shirts, right? You're not allowed to be straight. You're not allowed to be white. You're not allowed to be unapologetic. Stop.
Well, it's funny now. Now the term is, Laura. I found out I'm not Filipino. I'm white adjacent. So I'm not even Asian anymore. You're
white adjacent. And adjacent to what?
Exactly.
Well, I'm African American. My children were arguing about this on the way home from school. Apparently today, my husband told me that mom is African American because I'm South African, and I used to say to them, just don't say that. Just don't say that. But, now I'm kind of like, really? I don't have a right, I don't have a right to my heritage and to my home and to my identity and to the fire, like my DNA, the fire that lives in my soul, right? and I don't care anymore. It's not. I have never, ever, ever looked at people that way. And to me, all people are the same. Whether I'm sitting down to interview a president or sleeping on the street with street kids in Luanda, the capital of Angola, when I was like, I don't know, 20 years old, right in the Angolan War. Those kids are as important to me as when I'm sitting down with the Queen of England, right? It just, people are the same to me, and my kids are the same. We view all people the same, and I just explained it to them as we're all different, and we're not all created the same. However, we are equally entitled to protection under the law, and equally entitled to our God-given rights, right? And everybody, deserves those things, unless we give them up, unless we do something to give them up. And I just tell them respect is earned, and the only really two rules in our house are respect and kindness. And outside of that, it's pretty much a war zone.
Yeah, I love the comment that Chase just left us. Elon Musk is the richest African American in the world. I love it.
What intrigues me about Elon Musk is, apart from the fact that he's a fellow South African, is how many people remember what Elon Musk did after he sold PayPal when he was still living in South Africa. The South African currency is the rand, for those people who don't know. And I just find it so interesting. I think it was a defining moment, really, when he made all that money after selling PayPal. And he gave 1 million rand to every employee in his company, including the gardener and the tea lady and so on and so on. So, effectively, he made everyone in his company a millionaire, right? Even though 1 million rand is not $1 million, but in South African terms, I mean, I couldn't have even imagined, that kind of money when I was living in South Africa. And I think that really tells us that, that's a defining moment for Elon Musk, that tells us that he's really, really good. And I find it so curious that with transhumanism, he's chosen two things that are, supposedly next year, right? This year, actually, now it's 2022, he's going to show us how he can use the technology to restore people's memories, and also to make the paralyzed able to walk again, right? And I thought, why would he choose that? Because obviously the double-edged sword with the restoring memories is, how do you know they're your memories? Are we in the matrix now? And are they planting memories in your brain, or thoughts and whatever? So that's surely bad, right? And then I got to thinking about it. And what I wonder is he giving us the antidote before we get the poison? Because once we move into that world, with 5G, where we don't even know what's real and what's real and what's not, and we also we don't know what are our memories and what are not. Imagine if we know we have this technology from Elon Musk, that we have a chance to see whether it's real or not. And if you're in the future in a place where you don't know who's messing with your brain and how, right? Maybe that's the tool that's like the antidote to the poison. I think Elon Musk could, and this is, look, I haven't talked to him about this. This is just me coming up with this. And I've done a lot of work on the technology side of things and trying to understand where we're headed. So it's based on, some of that. And then I wonder why he chose paralysis to be the first thing, because he has made it obvious that these are only two of the things the technology can do. Why did he choose these two things first? And what I wonder about, what I would like to ask him, if I could, because I would love to interview him, is did he choose that because that is exactly what people asked Jesus to do, to affirm the existence of God? Right? Isn't that in the Bible? You remember how people would come to Jesus and they would ask for the sick to be healed and for the paralyzed to get up and walk again? Wasn't that the miracle that proved to us that God was real and Jesus was the Son of God? So is really Elon Musk, in a sense, confirming to us, not trying to be the creator, which when you look at Bill Gates, is doing experiments to block out the sun, right? And who wants to alter the DNA of the natural world by forcing farmers in across the third world to, deceiving them into taking on GM modified crops, right? And altering crop diversity in Africa and, and all the rest of it. These are people who are playing God, right? And who want to be God and who see themselves as gods. Whereas Elon Musk, on the other hand, what he's really doing with that paralysis, apart from the fact that he's showing us that the technology can be used for good, when obviously technology is a double-edged sword always, and there's a price for everything. But beyond that, in a very powerful way, he's reaffirming to us the existence of God.
Yeah, I find him to be a fascinating man. I kind of view him as a wild card. What a cute pup.
This is Annie.
Hey, pup.
Yeah.
Hi, Annie.
Wes, go ahead and chime
Well,
in.
you kind of touched on it, but the chat was asking about Musk. They wanted to know if you thought that Elon Musk is a good guy, or if he's one of the a deep stater, or if he's just kind of.
I think he's a good guy. I think he's a pain in their ass, and I think that what he's really doing is he's fighting for all of us, because he's the first one who talked about universal basic income for AI, right? And it's kind of scary when you look at what they did with COVID. Universal basic income is paying people to stay at home and do nothing, right? And I don't know about you, like, we all think that sounds like the greatest thing ever in the world. But I've worked since I was 14 years old, and I love work. Now, but don't get me wrong, I love lying in bed all day in my pajamas watching Yellowstone, right? And so I love going, on vacation to the beach. I could quite happily sit on the beach, for months and months and months. But at the same time, we all know what that feels like to create something, whether it's a technology or whether it's, as a construction person, to build something. I mean, whether you're a carpenter that makes something, I mean, there's that fulfillment that comes from work, that sense of independence and the power that comes from, here's something I can do. Here's my labor. Here's the American dream. You just work hard enough, right? And you can do this. You can like change your whole life, and you can possibly, change the world. Maybe you change your community. Maybe you change things for your family. Maybe you change things, in a certain way or a small way. But look at what that does for us. And when you look at the other side of that, and that, what do they say, that how many jobs is AI supposed to obliterate worldwide? Right. I think, by some estimates, it's 60 to 70% of jobs and that kind of thing. Even if it's not that much, even say it's 40%, 50%, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of idle hands. And as they say, idle hands do the devil's work. Right.
Yes.
So how would you control those people? Well, the free flow of narcotics is one way, because people who are addicted to drugs, they're not joining the army. They're not writing letters to Congress. They're not paying taxes. They're not functional. And by the way, these narcotics these days that are manufactured in laboratories, are just eating away the human brain. And there's no coming back from that, right? There's no coming back to full function. So when you look at that, and then you look at the whole ideology behind the 1619 project, what do they say?
Insidious.
They say that, they say that all forms of work are a form of slavery. That's the ideology behind demonizing work, right? That if you, no matter who you're working for, the company owner, the business owner, the landowner, they are the slave owner, and you are now the slave, right? You're working on the plantation, and that work itself is not a value in this ideology. And look at the number of people coming out of college who are completely unemployable and useless, right? They're getting degrees that don't even make them employable, because they're not actually trying to put them in the workforce. They're turning them into ideologues and political operatives whose job, their means of survival, becomes being an activist. So you don't join, a company or build a company or do this or that. You run an affinity group, right? You run one of the many chapters of, look at the Animal Rights Federation. They're in 87 countries. 87 countries. How many offices in those countries? The Open Society Foundation, they're in 120 countries. How many offices in those countries? Right. And so you start to think the Tides Foundation, right? The 1,000 Currents, the Kellogg Foundation, the Ford Foundation. Look at all of these foundations and these groups. What are they churning out? Activists and operatives. They're not churning out people who are creating in the same way that many people do when they create new technologies or new this or new that or whatever else. And so gradually work itself is being demonized, and there's a reason for that, because we are less effective and less important when we're not in control of our own destinies. That, if you're wondering about that noise, that is a hungry cat, and his name is Bert. And he is a pain in the butt. And hold on one second, because he is loud.
Okay.
Bert, come on, Birdie. Birdie, I know you're hungry.
Man, I'll tell you what, Wes, this is a fascinating conversation.
Bert was our
That's
neighbor's
a big cat.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
well, he's 21 years old,
Oh.
and he, I'm in the room in my office. I put his food in here so the dogs don't get it. And Birdie, he during the winter storm, our neighbors asked us to go feed their animals for them, and Bert jumped into my daughter's arms, and that was that. And he's never gone home.
Yeah, she just took, he took to her and she took to him, and the rest is history.
Well, she used to visit him on the porch all the time, where he was lording, over all the kittens. And well, fortunately, that's the one of the great things in living in a small town, right, in Texas, is like I first met my neighbor when we just moved in and we went away, and I got this phone call, and she's like, welcome, and I'm your neighbor across the street, and I see you're on vacation because your packages are piling up. Do you want me to put them away so no one knows the house is empty?
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's one thing. And I talked about this another time, where I'd love to see people, get back to walking outside and being able to just carry on a conversation with your neighbor instead of being behind a screen or behind a smartphone, or
We do that. We do that here.
Yeah. or sit down and have a cup of coffee, because as much as I love, the friends I've made over, with the help of technology over all these miles, nothing beats like I dearly would love to be sitting with you guys around a table right now, drinking a cup of coffee and just picking your brains about stuff,
Yeah.
because that's how I am, that I grew up old school. I don't apologize for that. I mean, that's just the way that I was. That's how I grew up socially, and I'll always be that way.
Most people prefer that, Drew. They want us to, they even started with cyber dating and all that stuff during the lockdowns. And
No, can you imagine right now, Lara, if you were single and you were trying to date with this technology stuff? Oh,
No.
goodness.
No, because the other part of that is, we tell our kids, do telehealth. You can see the doctor this way, use Google Classroom and, and so on and so on. But then we say to them, what do you mean you sent your boyfriend a picture of you doing what? Like, how could you be so stupid? You can't trust technology. And it's like, wait a minute. On the one hand, we're infusing every aspect of our children's lives with technology, and then on the other hand, we expect somehow that they're not going to use it. What are they supposed to do then? And by the way, within that, isn't it convenient that they want us in these smart houses and using smart this and smart that? Smart is just a substitute for surveillance, right? I mean, that's how they track you.
Oh, absolutely. I know there's a number of people that are dependent on the Alexa system, And I always tell people, man, do not use the Alexa thing, because that is 100% a surveillance thing.
100% surveillance. Yeah.
And the
I
same
love the
thing.
ADT ad. Do you see the ADT ad where the guy says, Google, open my front door?
Yo,
And you're just like, seriously? Seriously? You call that security? Are you guys nuts? Why do
yeah.
I want Google to have the power to open or close my front door? Why do I have anyone have that power?
Well, it's the same thing with that TikTok. Remember when they put TikTok on the naughty list for a good while back during the Trump administration, and for good reason. It was proven that China had a back door in it. So why would
How do we know that? Because we put back doors in all our technology.
Right. And it's just it's a never-ending thing. But you can almost guarantee with most of these apps, if not all, you're being surveilled all the time.
And what they put your alarm in there, right? They put the clock. So you set your alarm in the morning. So what does that mean? Well, you never turn your phone off. And so now all through the night, they've even identified with, doctors and physicists and scientists and behavioral psychologists and blah, blah, blah. They know when your biorhythms drop in the night and when you're most susceptible to influence and outside manipulation. And so who knows, what they have the ability to do while you're sleeping, and we never turn anything off. And nobody talks about the very basic things that you can do to practice digital hygiene. I mean, you talk to cybersecurity guys and white hat hackers and, the hackers and so on. And they're like, oh yeah, clean your cookies out every week, do this, do that, do that, do that. Right. There's, and there are very real things that we can be doing to protect ourselves, but they want us to believe that there's nothing we can do. They want us to believe, the Fourth Amendment is done. We have no privacy left.
No.
I just want to punch every person that says that to me, because I'm like, no, actually, the Fourth Amendment is still there.
Yeah.
However, if you don't fight for it, if you give it up, i.e. surrender, then it may as well not be.
Well, that's what I know that people that know their Constitution, and actually all you have to do is read the Constitution, take time to educate yourself and read the actual amendments, and you understand, if you're being infringed upon, or if, for example, you're stopped by the police and they want to just, toss your stuff here, there, and everywhere and search, right there on the spot. Well, hey, wait a second. I have a right against illegal search and seizure. Unless you tell me some probable cause or show me, that,
yes,
then, you need to stay out of my stuff. And
yes.
People all the time, so many people don't know that. They just take that kind of thing for granted. But, we have these amendments in the Constitution for a reason.
Everything that we need is in the Constitution.
Yes.
People often ask me about, what can we do and this and that. Every single mechanism. What's extraordinary about Washington and the founding fathers is that they anticipated all of this. Maybe they didn't know that the company was going to be called Google and it was going to be like this. But what they anticipated was every single one of the human behaviors, the lust for power and suspension of civil liberties and deception and all the rest of it. All of those things were practiced in some form of another throughout our history. And the founding fathers addressed all of it. And they put all of those things into the Constitution. And so what is going to be really interesting to find out is a couple of things, right? It was inconceivable to me, because I spoke to bioweapons people in defense, spoke to people in intelligence. I spoke to people in a lot of different capacities from the beginning of COVID. And none of them had any doubt that this classified as a CRBN attack, which is chemical, radiological, biological, and nuclear, right? And when we have a CRBN attack, what does it say in the Constitution. When you believe that a foreign power is interfering in your elections, or is, attacking your country, what are your constitutional duties and rights, and what are you supposed to do? We signed international treaties, nuclear arms treaties, right?
Mhm.
So there are certain protections in there for our nuclear arsenal and for everyone's that we are supposed to uphold. So if you have a commander in chief whose cognitive function is impaired, does that qualify as violating your nuclear, your responsibilities under that nuclear arms treaty? Because now, do you meet the standard and the definition of making sure that those things are, properly supervised and properly under control, and so on and so on? And when Biden's last medical exam was made public, if you notice, there was some reporting on the fact that he didn't take a cognitive exam. So, one great question that I wish, if I was at the White House, or if I was doing daily news reporting, one question that I would have asked the Biden administration is whether Biden has been declared fit for duty as commander in chief or not. Because by law, you cannot be declared fit for duty and wear a uniform in the United States Armed Services without taking a cognitive test. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's not allowed. So what is happening with that, right? Why do we accept that we don't get an answer? And maybe there's a very, reasonable explanation. And maybe, of course, it's not just Biden who's responsible for the nuclear arsenal. It's not like Biden just has a button and anytime he wants to, he just pushes it. Obviously, there's an entire infrastructure and checks and balances and safeguards and blah, 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 right? Around all of this. But there are some very valid questions there about how these things are perceived overseas and how they can be manipulated and used. Like, for example, can the Chinese and others demand weapons inspections the way we did in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, right? And make an argument that there's concerns about the cognitive functions of the president and what that means for this and this, and can they use that as a pretext? It doesn't mean it will succeed, but it certainly is possible. And when you look at all the different ways, in asymmetric warfare, an unconventional warfare that our adversaries are using to undermine the United States, and that, quite frankly, we use to undermine our adversaries, these things are, they can sound and easily be cast as being conspiratorial to people unfamiliar with them. But to people who do this stuff for a living, this is nothing, right? It's absolutely nothing. In fact, it's second nature. And so I would really like to see, we all would, right? To see a robust press corps that was challenging some of these things and asking the questions that people all across this country are desperately want asked. And they don't even bother. Instead, we get stories about what ice cream the president's eating.
Yeah. Wes, did you have a question or comment you wanted to go to?
I did. I don't want to shift gears too much, but I just wanted to get your take on, speculating on maybe what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years with respect to the vaccines, people taking them, and the policy responses moving forward. What do you see happening with that?
So I'm just going to get my crystal ball and I'm going to consult. This is what I used to say in my head when I would be like in Baghdad or something, and the morning show would ask you what's going to happen in the war, and I used to say I don't know, because I'm just a journalist.
Right.
But and honestly, I think right now we really don't know how this is going to end, right? So many things have happened that are they were, like you said, if I was asking my younger self, about where we would be now, right? You couldn't have imagined it. I could never have imagined that they could have locked down the entire globe. I couldn't have imagined that they would be even discussing forced vaccine mandates in Europe, which would mean repealing the Nuremberg Code, right? I mean, nothing is more sacred to us and to protect us as humanity than the Nuremberg Code, because what was done by the Nazis during the Second World War should never, ever, ever, nobody should have the power to do that ever again. And so that's why preserving the Nuremberg Code and the principle behind it is so, is fundamental, right? To not just our survival, but our children's and all the generations that follow. So it's so ironic to me that people will like, for example, attack me because I compared, I said that a lot of people see Fauci, and this is coming from doctors and many other people, right, who see Fauci as similar to Mengele, and there was such an outcry over that by some people, right? Many people, most of the ones I heard from, actually felt very strongly about that and agreed with it. So there are millions of people who see it that way, and there's a lot of history with Fauci, actually, with experiments on Black foster kids in 7 states with AZT and other experimental drugs with HIV, and much more to that has been widely reported on, even by NPR, CBS, NBC, and so on, and is not in dispute. And Fauci's role in that is not in dispute. But when you talk about that, of course, it's the wall of censorship, right, and moral outrage. And I understand the sensitivity, but at the same time, look at what you're talking about. Forced vaccine mandates in Europe are going to nullify the Nuremberg Code. I mean, the basic principle of the Nuremberg Code. And to me, I'm fighting for the Nuremberg Code because I care so much about what happened in the Second World War and what Mengele did, and that it should never, ever, ever happen to anyone ever again. And I regard, that is almost, the Nuremberg Code is there to protect every single one of us, right? If you start to pull that back and ultimately even repeal it, we're in a very, very dark place. And so what do I think is going to happen? Well, we know that while there are, lockdowns and insanity in a number of countries, we know that in every single one of those countries, there are just vast numbers of people who are never going to get vaccinated voluntarily. Never going to happen. Mm-hmm. Millions and millions and millions of people all across the world. We know that in Africa, an entire continent that makes up only around 4.1% of the total death toll from COVID. We know that, it may have moved on a little bit now, but it was just over 7% vaccinated for the entire continent. So we know that the media has pretty much ignored, 99% ignored the huge protests against the lockdowns and against forced vaccine mandates and against masks and closures and so on, right? We know that. We know that you have a whole country in Sweden, which has proven to people that there is another way that you can deal with this without obliterating your economy and without forced mandates and without vaccines and so on, right? If you choose to. We know that there are powerful voices standing up, some medical and some not, in favor of natural immunity. And look, you can't change the fact that even Johns Hopkins and the Roswell Park Cancer Institute and all of these, very prestigious medical institutions, what have they been saying for the last 10 years? That the secrets to treating cancer and even stage 4 cancer lie within our own immune systems. That really they're many doctors are moving towards the belief that if we can unlock the power of our own immune systems and strengthen that we can conquer more than any pharmaceutical company ever conquered in the world of disease and so on. I did an event at Johns Hopkins where I spoke and I sat with doctors, and there was a young girl who had stage 4 cancer, was supposed to be dead in, in an instant, and it survived years using exactly this kind of, immunotherapy, and using the power of the immune system to counter this, even stage 4 cancer. So you're not going to be able to suppress that because it's real. And whether it's doctors and scientists or herbalists or hippies or, naturalists or people just in countries where, that's all they have and they know the power of it, and so on and so on, you're never going to be able. What are you going to have to do to those people in order to force them to comply? What are you going to do with all the people who believe in sovereignty of their own body and freedom and the right to live free? I mean, you're going to have to kill them, right? You're going to have to put them in re-education camps. You're going to have to suppress them, and you're going to have to do that globally. And you're going to have to isolate everybody so we have no idea what's happening anywhere else, and we are not able to rally together and support each other and take it on, on a bigger scale. That's what you would have to do to continue on the path that you're on, because freedom lives in every one of us, and we decide, right? Who is some of the greatest freedom fighters in the history of the world? Nelson Mandela, of course, being the one of them that's the closest to my heart. When Mandela was on trial, right, for terrorism, and he was at the mercy of the South African government, he wrote the very famous Rivonia trial speech, and anyone can find it on the internet. And if you have time and you're interested, I would urge you to go and listen to that, because Mandela wrote these words that no one in his family and in the party wanted him to say, because they were certain he would be murdered for it. The Southern government would convict him and put him to death. And what he wrote in that speech, one of the things he wrote that I carry in my heart is that freedom is an ideal for which, he said, freedom is an ideal for which I would very much like to live, but it is an ideal for which I am very much prepared to die. And there was no doubt about his sincerity in that moment, because the people he was saying it to had the power to take his life in a heartbeat and never look back, right? And so what that really tells you, my friend Jewel told me this once when I said, our freedom is being taken from us. And she said, your freedom cannot be taken from you. It's in you. You can give it up. You can give it to them, but it can't be taken from you. And one of the people who really lived that and who represents that is an unusual figure in history. His name is Charles Vane, and he was a pirate. And pirates, have been demonized throughout history, and they did terrible things. They deserve all of that. But it's only part of the narrative, right? It's a very distorted narrative, because pirates were also among the very first freedom fighters. And pirates were also the mercenaries that were paid by Spain and Britain to do these terrible things in their service, right? Who realized, wait a minute, I could rape, pillage, and plunder for myself. Why am I doing it for them? And so, and really that's what they founded, was one of the first, what they were trying to build was one of the first free societies in the world. And while they did, when they captured slave ships, they were no saints, but they did actually free many slaves because they believed in the principle of freedom. So they killed many, but they freed many. And why am I telling you this? Well, because Charles Vane, when he was about to be hanged by the British in the square in the Bahamas, and I've been there and seen where this happened, right? Because this history fascinated me. I thought pirates were just fantasy until I watched the fabulous series Black Sails, and then started to look into it.
We got Black Sails fans in the chat.
I love Black Sails. That was an amazing show.
Zach says Black Sails was such a good show.
Yeah, and, so remember that moment in Black Sails where Charles Vane is about to be hanged by the British, and he looks into the square that still exists, and he sees his men, and he knows that they're there to rescue him, and he knows that they will, right? That he can be saved, and he motions to them. He just, with a sign, to stand down. And what did he do? He chose to die, to be free, to be a martyr and a symbol for freedom and for free men that would live on long beyond his death. And what does that mean? It means that until the very moment of death, even though they had the power to take his life, they never took his freedom from him. And in the end, it was his decision. He chose to die. And so that's, the same with me. For example, I was gang raped and beaten and sodomized and almost killed in Egypt. And I learned from another South African woman years before who was also raped and gutted and her throat slit and who survived. And she said at the trial of the men, her rapists, the judge asked her how she could be so strong. And what she said to him was, they took so much from me that night. Why would I give them the rest of my life as well? It made no sense to her. And think about that. Think about the freedom and the power in that. I don't choose to be a victim. I'm deciding what I'm going to give you because I'm free to make that choice. And some days, I don't have as much power over that choice as I might want, right? But in the end, I'm choosing not to be a victim. And I'm not living as a victim. I'm living as a free person. You cannot chain me in that moment of terror and evil forever, right? You had me there when I had no power. But beyond that, I'm giving you as little as I possibly can.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I admire you so much, Lara, because you've seen so much, you've done so much, but you've persevered through so much, and you are indeed an inspiration to so many. And it's just a testament to that, the turnout that we've had this evening. People here with all the fervor and the interesting questions that they've had. We've had so many questions from the chat, more numerous than we could possibly get to. But it's so amazing to sit down and chat with you about all of this. You're just you are truly a fountain of knowledge, but you're also a truth warrior, and that is what I love about you. And I know we're closing in on a 2-hour and 30-minute mark, so I do want to wrap sometime soon. But I just real quickly, I wanted to kind of get your take on the state of modern journalism, and there were a couple of questions that we got from the chat that also sort of alluded to this. So the way that journalism is going, how do we get back to the noble part of journalism where we're going to get to the truth no matter where that leads, and we're going to ask the right questions and provide transparency and inform the people? When do we get back to that without all the agenda and the bullshit, frankly?
So I'm glad you asked me about this, because it is important to talk about. And first, I just want to say that I really appreciate what you said about me, and it means a lot to me. Really does mean a lot to me. And honestly, the only reason I'm able to survive one attack after another is because people, they know when someone is honest, and the people they want to hear and they want to engage with me. But without that, they would have gotten rid of me a long time ago, right? I would not have had any shows or platform. It was always the extraordinary response, whether it was when I was a CBS correspondent or living in Iraq, doing the chief foreign correspondent at CBS, or correspondent at 60 Minutes. It didn't matter. It was, it always sort of surprised, I think, the bosses that there was such an extraordinary audience response to my work. And that was the same thing with my show on Fox Nation that a couple of years ago didn't even exist. and then, became so popular. Now, everywhere I go, people say to me, I love, No Agenda, No Agenda. I love that show. And so when I say to you that the people and the audience are really the only reason my career is still going, it's not to blow smoke up, your whatnot, right? It really is true. And the other thing I want to say is that everybody has stuff to deal with, right? Everybody goes through a lot. Life is hard, and it's hard for all of us. And yes, it may seem like in some ways, someone else's life is harder than yours, but then also look at the rewards that I've had in my life, right? I mean, I have beautiful children who are everything to me, and I meet people, and I've done stories with people whose children are murdered, or whose child is born with a disease, and they know that they have an entire life of misery, and then they're dead before they're even in double digits, right? I mean, there's so many parts to this. I've been able to travel the world. I've been in the mountains of the Hindu Kush, and in places that many people have never even heard of, and I've seen truly extraordinary things, and I've been reduced to nothing, and been able to rebuild and find and have no doubt about exactly who I am. And now I have another opportunity for people to see exactly what I'm made of, and for to see me as I really am. And I think that's a gift. I'm not afraid of being attacked, because these to me are just they're real meaningful opportunities to do more, and to move beyond them, and to show these people up for what they are, and to expose the tactics, so that other people are encouraged by that, and can also expose the tactics, and we can rise and stand together. It's not just one person here and one person there and one person there. So, like, for me, I think that there's always, when you look at someone who's really suffered and really struggled, there's other parts to that. And so I feel a little bit guilty when people say you've been through so much, because as much as I've been through, I feel like it's nothing in lots of ways. Now, I mean, I had cancer at 41, right when my daughter was 10 months old, and my son was 1, and my stepdaughter was not much older than that. So I don't mean that it was easy to go through, and that this is all nothing. I just mean that life is so hard, and when you're lucky enough to have so much else, I've been loved every moment of my life, from the moment I was born. There are children who are born into this world who never know what love is, and don't know what it means to be loved. I mean, imagine an existence going through the world in a loveless existence. Like, so I just think about how fortunate I really am. And I say that to you in a moment where, my life is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, right? Not easy in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not I'm not trying to pretend and to minimize anything, but I just want people out there to know that I know how about that struggle, right? And that exhaustion. I mean, there's so many days when I'm just so tired, and I figure that God's plan is that, to wear you down, so that by the end of your life, you're ready to shuffle your mortal coil, because you just want some peace and quiet, and you're just exhausted from the fight. That's just a joke I make with my kids. But anyway, that is just important to me, that I want people to understand that I am by no means the only person that's fighting, or the only person that suffered, or anything like that. We all suffer. And my mother used to say, everyone pays the piper, right? Everything has a price. And She also used to say, "There's always someone waiting to mug you," which was one of the more popular ones, right? That my brothers and sisters and I that we like to remember because of what is really the principle behind that.
Yes.
And love many, trust few, and always paddle your own canoe, right? As we move into a world where people want you to be in a welfare type of state, and where you don't actually work for anything or own anything, and you're just dependent. I mean, that that's freedom that comes from standing on your own 2 feet. That to me is that's one of the most important things in life. So don't let them take all of that from you, And then how does that relate to the media and your question about journalism? I love that you used the word noble, because I've been talking about this subject a lot the last few weeks, because I am in the process of establishing my own show and my own platform. And what I want is, I don't want to just do a show that, hopefully is pretty good and successful, and I can, make some money out of it and support my family, and then, retire and die. What I want to do is actually is fight for what is noble in journalism, and create a platform that is a home for that, so that we don't take it. Those of us who have worked in legacy media and who have lived what journalism can be at its best, what it's supposed to be, what the standards and principles of real journalism really are, that we don't take that knowledge to our grave. We don't take that experience with us. It's not meant for us. It's meant for us to pass on. It's meant to be shared, right? And if we let it die with us, if we say the mainstream media is all, is worthless, and now it's all about new media and blah, 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 that is a trap. And it's another deception, because actually nothing is, very little is worthless, right? Very little. There are some things. I think of a few people, but truly, right? That's what Machiavelli and all of that is about, and complexity of issues and character and everything. So that with everything that destructive and evil and dishonest that so much of our media has become, within all of that, there are great journalists, and there is something noble for us to hold on to. So I want to fight for that, and I want to do it in a couple basic ways. I'm not retiring. I'm not hanging up my boots and going to disappear into some, college, and not that they'd ever hire someone like me, but, and try to, pass on some things and opine about my glory days. No, I want to be a living, breathing example of what journalism is, and, aspire to keep producing that at the level that, that we really all aspire to. And
Right.
at the same time, I want this to be a platform for independent voices, for young voices, for whatever it happens to be, where I realized that many of the journalists who are coming up on their own, say you are Andy No, or you are Drew Hernandez, who are covering Antifa, you will never get a seat at the table in the media today, the way it is, because
Right.
you are on the wrong side of one of their most important deceptive narratives, right? And so you're fighting to even for the right to call yourself a journalist, which is ridiculous, because you're being denied legitimacy by the institutions that have become so corrupt and so morally bankrupt, and are not doing what they are supposed to do. So my thing is, if you give up on those institutions, you have done the job for them, right? They have corrupted only a small percentage of it with a lot of power that's able to control it, but they haven't corrupted everybody, and they haven't even corrupted the majority. So, we can debate that, but there's enough people in there. We know that. What you want to
Right.
do is you want to fight for it, so that you don't make it easy for them. Don't do the job for them. But more importantly, we are not ever going to go back. That's not how the world works. However, as we move into a new media landscape with technology and the world changing as it is, we want to preserve that nobility, what journalism is supposed to be, and the standards that protect that, right? And
Yes.
we want, so that's what I'm trying to build, is a base that will be hopefully just one of many bases for media as it moves forward, that is a home for real journalists, for that aspires to a decent standard, right? It's not just any jackass in their mother's basement in their underwear. And that it is a place where people can be reminded about real journalism. So for example, there's a group of reporters in Nigeria, in an organization called Rural Watch. And they are the eyes and ears on the front line of the biggest genocide of Christians happening right in the world today in the past 20 years, beginning on 9/11, actually, same 9/11 as the US. Um, Islamic terrorists moved into a village, which they took over. It's on high ground. They renamed it the Watchtower. And that has been their base of operations, from which they have murdered more than 70,000 Christians in a systematic genocide and ethnic cleansing that is taking place. And these journalists, they live on a shoestring. They live in poverty, and they are truly at risk. And they're well educated, and they're well spoken, and they're smart, and they're strategic, and they embody everything that I ever wanted to be as a journalist, and that I ever believed in as a journalist. They embody the very best in all of us. They're not the only ones. There are many more out there. There are Afghan journalists who have lost their homes, their jobs, their country. They've lost everything. And they too embody that spirit of nobility, of what journalism should be. So if we preserve that, I want all of those journalists out there who were mugged by reality along the way, or who followed the facts and got on the wrong side of the narratives, who have that institutional knowledge. I want to provide a place where some of them are doing it, actively by with their own shows, or working on other shows, working with younger journalists, mentoring them. I want to have there's a whole bunch to this, but that is what I want to create, because I believe that the future of journalism is about protecting and fighting for that core of what it is when it's noble, and making sure that we equip the future, the generations of journalists that will come after us, that they have those tools, because people will always seek knowledge, and they will always seek the truth, and they will always ask questions. That is innate in us. We don't have to worry about that part of it, because people have done that from time immemorial, right? As long as we've walked on the earth, that is one of the things that we've done. So I don't worry about that part. What I worry about is that when you're when you're coming up into the world of journalism, you don't have to go to journalism school to be a journalist, right? You can, and but there are
I'm
lots
proof.
of people.
I'm proof of that.
There you go.
I
So
go
lots
I
of
go
people-
on instinct, and I go on on drive. Those are the two things that I go on.
And what you need, though, what you need when you're part of something, and so for example, one of the things I want to do is to write a book with other journalists, with other veteran journalists, that becomes, say, like, the journalist's Bible, right? That everyone who wants to be a journalist or gets into journalism wants to read that book, because it preserves, say, the 10 commandments of real journalism. And these are the things that you do, and tells it in an interesting way. That would be something that I would love to do and collaborate on with other journalists. That I am going to do, actually. I know I am.
I hope you do, because I'll tell you, and this isn't just because you're on my show or anything. I genuinely mean it. If I was looking for one mentor in this profession, I would pick you. And I say that because to me, the way that you report, the way that you put a human face on stories, the way that you bring facts to the table without bias, that to me is the core of what journalism means. And that is a type, that's what drives me to want to do it. Really quick little anecdote I wanted to tell you. You know, when we spoke on the phone before we went live, you know, and I was telling you about January 6th, it was funny, and Wes can vouch for this because he was there. We were on on one of these live streams together, and the folks in the chat, you know, Wes was kind of lamenting that he couldn't go to the rally in DC, and I said, well, I live near DC, but you know, darn it, I wish I could go. I just don't have the means, you know, I just don't have it monetarily right now. Man, you know, it's funny, the people in my chat, my viewers,
Wow.
Lara, they turned around, sent over funds just to say, we want you to go and cover this. Please be our eyes on the
Wow.
ground. And so that's how I ended up going to DC and covering it. And
That's amazing.
even though I was literally just armed with my phone, I went down there and live streamed right down there on Constitution Avenue, marched with the crowd, got footage and everything else because I knew that the viewers were counting on me. And that was my first real experience, you know, with what I like to call guerrilla journalism, you know, and doing it for people that really wanted the truth. And that to me meant everything.
I think that's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And you know, I want to tell you two things about that. One is you shouldn't have to struggle, right? That's part of the reason I want to create this platform, is that it shouldn't just be guerrilla journalism is great, and the spirit of it is invaluable to all of us, right? It goes right to the heart of everything. But there are so many of us who are struggling, and by creating this platform, what I would hope to do is that it would give guerrilla journalists and other people a home where there can be some shared resources, where everybody owns their own content and owns their own brand, right? You don't work for so and so. It's not like that. That's part of the new, you know, future of journalism, right? I'm not trying to create a network. What I'm trying to create is a networked platform where people can go and they can pick and choose who they want to listen to, and we can, you know, there's shared resources in terms of expertise and experience and guidance and mentoring, but also in terms of cybersecurity, right? Because we should all have the ability. You look at the amount of money that is being generated by Facebook, right? What chance does someone have if they're censored and taken out by Facebook or Twitter or something else, right? I mean, these people give away millions of dollars like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So why should it be all of us be on the bones of our butts, right? And pulling a dime from here and there. I'm hoping that with something like this that other people can also create, that it will elevate and generate more opportunities and more funding so that people don't have to struggle so much. That's one of the things that I really want to do with this. The other part of what you said that I think is really important, and this is going to be in the journalist's Bible or handbook or whatever you want to call it, right? You said, I love the way you report the facts without bias. And I have to address that, because the truth is we all have bias, right? I am no different to anybody else. But this is precisely why we need the standards and why we need that institutional knowledge, because the standards are part of what protects us from our own bias. So if my bias is a certain way, I remember that I really need to address the other side of this, right? I really need to give the other person an opportunity to explain their position, and a real opportunity, not the nonsense that these, reporters do where they're doing a hit piece on you. And once they've got the whole hit piece figured out, they call you to get you just basically to endorse their hit piece, right? Because they're not actually listening to anything that you say. They're just going to take the little bits to fit the false narrative that they want and smear you and take you down. So I don't mean that kind of response. I mean a real opportunity to respond, and where you take the time, like in South Africa, growing up under apartheid during the struggle, my heart, my soul, my bias was with those fighting against apartheid, fighting the injustice of racism, fighting for their freedom, fighting for equal rights, and so on and so on. I mean, it wasn't even a contest, right? I couldn't have been more biased towards that side. But I always, because I work for a news agency, right? I always went to the other side. And when I did that, I actually listened. So it's not enough to just go to the other side or to give someone 4 minutes to respond, before your deadline so that you can cover your butt and say that you did what you were supposed to do. No, it's about really taking the time to understand the other side. And in fact, in South Africa, once, just before the elections, there was a coup. It was very violent and blah, blah, blah. It was carried out by the white right in a partnership and in a forged alliance with black people on the other side. And I was the only journalist that was given access to the people, who carried out the coup. And afterwards, their spokesperson, he really got hammered by all the other journalists because it was a big, big, big story. And nobody else got the access that I got. And they all said it was because I had big boobs and because of the way I looked and blah, 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 all the same, nonsense that they have been saying for 35 years. And he actually turned around and said to them, "You're wrong. That's not why we gave it to her. That's not why she was the only person we called in the middle of the night. That wasn't it. Let me tell you why it was. It was because for the last 8 years, she's the only one who ever genuinely listened and genuinely gave us a chance to respond and genuinely, tried to understand and to be honest about it." So that is what I mean about the journalist Bible, right? We make subjective decisions all the time, but the process of real journalism is part of what protects us from our own bias and being aware of our own bias. The last thing I'll say is when I did a podcast with Mike Ritland, just got the podcast Mike Drop, and Mike is spectacular and a former Navy SEAL dog trainer who's one of my favorite people in the whole world. And Mike asked me about this, and it created a big thing because I talked about the fact that most journalists are biased, and I didn't even think that was newsworthy. It was just so obviously true. And yet it went viral without anyone pushing it or paying for it, and it went viral worldwide, which was just astonishing. But my boss at 60 Minutes wrote to me after that, my old boss, and he said to me that his greatest achievement as executive producer of that show was making us aware of our own bias, and that it was underappreciated by everyone except the audience. And I just thought that was one of the many very valuable things that he said to me along the way, that I have carried with me, because that is the truth. It's underappreciated by everyone except the audience. And my goodness, did I underestimate the amount, the bubble, the strength of the walls, and how much we lived in our own bubble. So we're always you cannot be aware of what you don't know, right? We're always going to have these biases, but the processes, of real journalism, they're really important to protect us from that. And as long as we're aspiring to be unbiased, we're at least trying to reach that objective, right? And when we look at if we really try to tell the whole truth, not just slices of it, to create a misleading or a false picture by narrowly focusing on this and that and whatever else. Having an honest conversation about that and exposing those things and helping and letting people know how you can deal with it, I think that will be an invaluable part of preserving the nobility of journalism and giving that to people who are making their own way, because you can't do it all on your own. There's nothing greater than a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And well, bravo. That was so well said.
Absolutely.
Wes, if you have anything in closing that you want to ask or a comment you
Wes
want to make.
slipped into a coma because I've been talking so much.
No, you know what? Whenever I have a fascinating guest on that makes really good points, and I love listening to, I just love to just listen. And you've been great. Sometimes you'll spend like 5 minutes with someone, and you'll learn more in that 5 minutes maybe than somebody if you've had a teacher for 4 years. And I kind of feel like I've gotten that tonight. So thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Imagine being one of my children.
Yeah.
And you haven't met my husband.
Well, I mean, yeah, I have to echo what Wes said, Lara. You have been absolutely informative, entertaining, illuminating. My goodness, you are one awesome human, and you are fascinating. And I am just, so thrilled that you took the time, and so thankful and grateful to you for that. I mean, this interview probably made my 2022, to be honest. I hope that I hope that I hope that we can have you back on, because there's a lot of stuff that we weren't even able to get into, because we got.
Of course, you can have me back on. And thank you for asking. I mean, I'm terrible with technology, right? That's well documented at this point. But it's so funny. I don't know if people know that, you DM me on Twitter, and I don't do a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really easy, right? Because you just asked and I said yes. And it's funny because, I just so appreciate that there are people who are standing up and doing this. And I think it's pretty extraordinary. And it's really important. It's really important. And it matters to a lot of people.
Yes.
Even if people used to laugh at me because I would spend 2 hours talking to, say, a waiter in a restaurant about my work and whatever story I was working on and whatever else, and get them to, you got to watch my piece on this or that. And one of my friends at CBS, she always used to laugh at me because she was in the PR department, and she used to say, I mean, there you go, one fan recruiting them, one fan at a time, right? And and it never occurred to me that it mattered how many people you reached. It was like being in the floods in Mozambique, and I was I was crying because of these 20-something kids who had been separated from their parents. And when we came out of this thing, it really moved me, and I was crying. And I remember the veteran network correspondent who was there with me looked at me, and he was like, he said, well, for goodness sake, he said, you better toughen up. You ain't gonna make it in this business if you're crying over that, like 20 kids. Mm-hmm. And of course, I just looked at him and I felt sorry for him, right? Because he didn't understand. It wouldn't have mattered if it was one kid. It broke my heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you have no
absolutely.
idea how tough I am, right? You have no idea what I'm capable of surviving. And quite frankly, I don't have, I couldn't care less. I don't need to explain it to you, because all the people that looked at me and thought Barbie's never going to make it in the war, right? They were all wrong, right? Because they couldn't see what was right in front of them. And I've never been afraid. In fact, it's never even been a choice that even that one child, putting myself in that position and thinking about what it was like for them in the middle of the floods, and to be separated and to lose everything and see their pain and their fear, and you just your heart breaks and you want to hold them all in your arms and make it better for all of them, and you can't. And I don't know how to deal with that except to just to live it, to just live and walk right through it, and let it tear me apart for that moment. And then, if you can't stand the heat, you got to get out of the kitchen. So then you got to do your job. And that's why people ask me all the time, aren't you super, do you have PTSD, and aren't you super, screwed up from everything you've seen? And the answer is no. I'm really not. I'm really pretty grounded, because, even with what happened to me, I know bad things happen to good people, and I don't ever run from those things. I'm not afraid of life, and I'm not afraid of the world. I have fears. I'm human. But you act in the presence of those fears, right? You act in spite of them, because there's life is to be lived. It's a
Yeah,
gift.
it is. Yeah,
Absolutely.
indeed. And you've seen, and I think it's just given you greater strength and insight, because you've seen the best of humanity, you've seen the worst of humanity, you've seen both sides, and you have, I think, an intimate understanding, more so than many other people get to have in a lifetime, of just how those two extremes really work.
So,
And
it's interesting that you say that. It's a really good point, because having seen both, why would I surrender to the worst of humanity? Why would I give in to that? Why
yes.
would I not fight for the best in
Mhm.
humanity? Right?
Yes.
That's not even a choice.
Hmm.
And people, there's always that question of, why do you go and do it to yourself, and how do you go to these places, and how do you go back to them, and blah blah blah. And I could never come up with a good answer to that question, because it never seemed to satisfy anyone. But then I finally realized, after trying to answer it for more than 20 years, I was like, I go because I believe in the good, because I'm fighting for the good that is in all of us, and I know it's in us because it's in me. I know it's real, right? And I know it's worth fighting for. And that's how I know it's in all of us. So I don't ever have to worry about that. I don't agonize over it. I just go.
Yeah, and to end it on a fun question. This is just off the wall. This is one of the questions we had earlier. Somebody said, "Do you like science fiction? And what is your favorite science fiction show?"
That's funny, because I used to hate science fiction, right? I didn't like it at all. I couldn't understand the point. I'm so grounded in reality that these kind of end of world, bleak, dark, kind of science fiction future stuff. I just wanted to know so much about what was really around me, and I wanted to see it all and to understand it. I mean, everything is a search for understanding, right? How can I understand this? And I want to know what it feels like. I want to know what it smells like. So I was so immersed in that world. But I have improved on that position, and I really just, do the Hunger Games qualify as science
That
fiction? Love
I think that counts. Yeah. You
the Hunger
know,
Games. And what was the book? My father gave me a famous science fiction book when I was 12. My father gave me 12 books that was sort of very different. Chariot of the Gods. Chariot of the Gods
very
was the
interesting.
science fiction book that he gave me then. And of course, I was a Tolkien fan. I know that's kind of a little bit into that realm. But my husband and my son they love science fiction, and so especially my son has taken me more into that world. And now what I realize actually is science fiction is really important as a roadmap to understanding where some people are trying to take us. Actually, it's not just fantasy, and it's not something so sort of outlandish. It
Mhm.
really is. It's one of the things. One of the tactics in information warfare is to telegraph exactly what you're going to do, right? Because that again allows you to control that narrative, and
Yeah.
that also seems to be what they're doing with science fiction. It's
Hmm.
fascinating, because these things that seemed so unrealistic and impossible and would never happen before, now they're very, very real. I hated the Matrix, right?
Hmm.
But now, like, we're in danger of being in the Matrix.
Yeah.
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 I gotta go back and watch that film again.
Well, I appreciate that somebody asked that question, only because on Thursdays I do a completely different type of stream. See, we cover Battlestar Galactica, that was on just in the earlier 2000s, and we've been going through that
I
show.
am familiar.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've been going through that show episode by episode, and
Oh,
and
that's
uh,
funny. Because I
and
was a Battlestar Galactica fan.
and
I used to prefer that to Star Wars.
and the just the interesting, just like you said, the telegraphing of, the way that with that we have AI in these
Mm-hmm.
robots that they're building, you can't help but think, oh my God, are they real? Is there going to be real silence? It's
Right?
like, so it's like, yeah. So I have a ball doing that because it's a completely different shift of gears, and it's just, a good fun thing to sit there and break down those episodes. But
And there were
yeah.
some other movies around the Hunger Games, right? There were some other ones with a whole lot of young
Mhm.
people that were like a series of films. One of them where they lived in this world, they couldn't go beyond the wall. I don't remember what that one was called, but that one was also interesting. And the Weatherman, was that another?
Mhm.
That was another. That's a TV series that I also thought was really interesting. I don't know if it qualifies as science fiction.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting stuff, and being an '80s kid, it's funny. Wes was doing a red pill. What are your red pill movies?
Yeah.
The other night, and I told him, for me, it was a rather obscure kind of B movie that had the wrestler Roddy Piper in it at the time. They Live. That was a very good allegory on what's going on now. And then there was, of course, Red Dawn. you know?
Red Dawn.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. See, I didn't even watch Terminator, right? I was like,
Mhm.
but my son was watching it the other night, and I was like, holy guacamole.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wait a minute. Who made this film? Okay, start it again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that actually was very prescient.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It is. It blows your mind when you go back and you wonder, wow, man, so many of these movies and stuff back when we were growing up,
Yeah,
was this like predictive programming? Were they warning us?
I know. You know
It's
what it reminds me
fascinating.
of? It's like all this, aliens, 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 right? Like, I mean, literally 2 years ago, you were on the extreme end of insanity if you were one of the alien people. And
Mhm.
now everyone's talking about aliens and as if it's like completely normal and blah blah blah. And by the way, at the Nuremberg trials, when they talked about der Spinner and the Thousand-Year Reich and the rest of the Nazi strategy, part of it was to stage a fake alien invasion in order
Project
to,
Bluebeam.
yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, they made a movie about that.
Yep.
They made a terrible B movie about the Nazis having a base on the moon and invading the Earth from the moon in a faked alien invasion, right? I mean,
Mhm.
seriously, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, but yeah, you wonder sometimes if some of these people were super red pilled early on and they were warning you. You
Some of
never
them,
know.
you know who was? Dr. Seuss was.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Just look how they moved to cancel poor Dr. Seuss. Jeez, oh
And
man.
why? It wasn't for
Hmm.
Go Dog Go, right? Or Green Eggs and Ham. It was because Dr. Seuss, actually, I did not know this. And if they hadn't canceled him, I would never have found out. But when I started to look into who he really was and the work that he did, he was a very significant man. A very significant man.
Yeah, he was absolutely. I'm glad that people still got the opportunity to have his message, and I'm glad that there's still some of his books at least available out there, even though I know they're trying to bury those right now. But yeah, books.
This is why what I'm leaving to my children in my will, my husband and I, what we've been doing and what I encourage other people to do is build a library. An underground library.
Mhm. And also,
Buy those books. Buy those books before they're all digital and they're altered.
and also, that for those of you that do like the things that you grew up on that are maybe around our particular age group, that you maybe you were a Gen X kid, or you know, what they would consider a boomer now. You grew up on the classics. Well, get your physical media. Cannot stress it enough, folks. Get physical media.
Buy
Keep that
as
collection.
many books as you can and
Yes.
store them. You can join with friends. You know, find a place to keep those books, and have you know, underground libraries. It sounds like crazy, right? But I saw a picture of the server farm that Google has in Barcelona inside an ancient cathedral. And this is just their server farm, that is their library, right? Because they've gone all over the world buying all of these original manuscripts and digitizing them. And it's terrifying to me that any one company, no matter who they are, would have that kind of power and reach. And so, you know, and when you look at how they're redefining words, right? And changing the meaning of words, changing the meaning of prayers, rewriting prayers, you know, in all different languages. How do we hold on to that history? It has to be a physical record. So even if you know, you don't have to be rich to be part of a group of people who, you know, slowly over your lifetime buy books and build libraries, build so many libraries that they can't destroy them.
Preserve our knowledge, culture, and history, folks. That's paramount in, I think, preserving future generations of our humanity. So I want to thank everybody that came out tonight and checked out the stream. Remember, folks, all of you viewing right now, without you, there is no us. We appreciate you and are grateful from the bottom of our hearts that you spent the time that you did with us, all 3 hours and nearly 10 minutes. Thank you so much. And
I'll leave you with one story, a short one.
okay.
My son was asked in a test at school what the motto of Texas is. And actually, in the Native American language, Tejas with a J meant friend. So the state motto is friendship. But my son, poor child growing up in this home, he wrote, in the words of Davy Crockett, the state motto is y'all can all go to hell and I'll go to Texas. That's what he thought the state motto was.
I love it. I love it.
You can see it. Unofficial motto.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the unofficial motto. Yeah.
Well, Wes, if you want to go ahead and do a quick outro, plug your channel, you have the floor, sir.
Hey, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us today in this amazing interview. And thank you, Lara, for being here. Man, I'm still unzipping the file right now. So yeah, I'm Wes Moody of the Wes Moody Webcast. You can find me at youtube.com/Wes Moody Webcast to talk about current events, pop culture, occasional conspiracy theories, occasional car talk, gaming streams, and then I will vlog about whatever the heck I want to because it is my webcast. Hope to see you there, my friends. Thank you.
Sounds awesome. I'm gonna look it up.
And
Thank you.
And remember, folks, on Tuesdays you could always check out Rogue Resistance, where we talk about whatever we darn well want to, because hey, YouTube's going to try to stop us, but in the end, we're going to get the message out somehow. And I'll always keep fighting because that's what I believe in, is going after the truth. We're going to continue to go after that truth, and I'm not going to stop. And you folks are a big reason why. So I love you, all you guys and gals out there. Thank you again for your time. We definitely thank the wonderful and incomparable Lara Logan for her time. And we will see you guys around probably next week. Yeah. And just remember, in this crazy world, folks,
spending $150 million on cocaine would make sense.